You can show your cameras, guys.
All right. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Fright Lounge. Did you guys get to see the video?
I could see it. I couldn't hear it.
Oh, interesting. Juan, Sam?
Yeah, I did see the video. The intro was really nice. I don't know if that was you with the mask on, but I didn't hear you talk. I didn't hear no audio. I just saw video, no audio.
Oh,
Yes.
weird.
Same
I
here.
think you still had your microphone muted, Rigor.
Oh, shoot. It's weird because hold on. What's going on here? I could hear it. Should I play it once more just for everybody's edification?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can do that. All right. I'm going to play this once more, folks at home, especially those coming in late. You should be able to hear this.
Okay.
Hello. I am Santo, the world's greatest wrestler. Regor has invited me here to present to you one of the greatest wrestling challenges of my life. Oh, wait. Is it sharing? I am pitted against my friend and sometimes adversary, Blue Demon. This is one of my greatest matches of all time. So get ready to enjoy Santo being victorious. Could you guys hear that at all?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, hold on. I don't think I was sharing. Are we recording? We're recording. All right, I'm going to try it once more. I apologize.
That's okay.
Share my screen. Share. I'm still new to this whole thing. All right, here we go. And, of course, I can't reach any of the controls. Let's try this. Hello. I am Santo, the world's greatest wrestler. Regor has invited me here to present to you one of the greatest wrestling challenges of my life. In this, I am pitted against my friend and sometimes adversary, Blue Demon. This is one of my greatest matches of all time. So get ready to enjoy Santo being victorious.
And so begins one of the most anticipated matches, Santo versus Blue Demon. Many fans in the crowd believe that Santo could lose this match. The invincible Santo will be put to the test. Santo is a really strong wrestler, a great ruler with an incredible physique, weighing more than 220 pounds, but who still flies through the air thanks to the skills of Blue Demon. Blue Demon's been waiting for this chance to fight Santo. He not only wants to defeat him, he wants to rip his mask to pieces. Look at those ruler moves. He doesn't care about anything as long as he defeats Santo. Look at Blue Demon. He's been training for days and weeks for this great challenge. And now he uses a dangerous Boston Crab. Oh, Santo is able to break the move by using all the strength of his legs. As always, Santo and Blue Demon bring a lot of attractive ladies to the arena. The crowd screams for their idol, Santo! Santo! He's trapped in an arm lock. Now gets a hard blow to the ribs. Santo seems to be out of energy. Sometimes Santo lacks the weight, but he makes up for that with skill. Santo was pinned to the mat but knew how to avoid the count. Santo looks like he never tires. Oh, but takes a heavy punch to the face. The stakes are high now. Blue Demon is now receiving the heavy blows from this monster who weighs over 220 pounds. However, Blue Demon is now quick on his feet. The match has barely started, but everyone has showed us great moves and courage. Blue Demon gets sick of it. Flying scissors! Great move by Blue Demon! Whoa, it's amazing! The crowd wants to see a legal win, and Blue Demon gives it. Victory for Blue Demon. Just listen to that sold-out crowd ovation.
So were you guys able to see and hear that?
Yes. That's pretty
time.
cool. That was really cool.
Awesome. Thank you. That was me and my grandson.
Wow, that's really cool. The very good montage there. Yeah.
Awesome.
I thought Santo looked a little different than he usually did.
Yeah, he's a little. His physique is actually better than mine, so I had to portray Santo, and I couldn't do it well enough.
One of the things I wanted to say about the mask, which is very important. The mask is, that's a legendary mask, but the eyelids on the mask, it's a pretty nice mask. But I have some, I have a couple of the masks, and one of them is near the original one. I have an original Blue Demon, but the Santo one, the eyelids needed to be a little bit smaller.
Yeah,
Those are pretty big eyelids, yeah.
Amazon, this and the Blue Demon one. So my
Okay.
grandson and I, we wanted to be Santo and Blue Demon, so I got them. But
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice looking mask.
I should have brought. I have a signed Mil Mascaris one in the other room, and I forgot to bring it on. So,
oh, wow, oh,
yeah, yeah. My brother just got a Mascara Dorada one too. He collects masks, so he has a ton. He has like 4 different ring worn Mascara Dorada and a couple Kendo ones. And if so, he's more into modern guys. But yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, wow. All right, hold on one second. My computer's slowing down in a second here for me. I'm just closing this down and getting my notes. So I just first want to say hello and welcome to the Fright Lounge. All of you who are watching, hopefully you got to hear the audio and see the video of what we did. This is the show in which the best horrorologists in town will discuss horror in depth and get a conversation going for seasoned horror viewers, as well as helping introduce new people into the horror genre. I am Rigor, of course, from Then Is Now podcast and the East Meets the West podcast, and my co-host is Bill Van Ryn.
From fanzine Drive-In Asylum and blog Groovy Doom.
Awesome, awesome. So this is episode 4, and man, this is going to be a special one, man. Today we've got not one but 2 awesome guests. If you haven't already noticed, with us today are Sam Panico from BNS About Movies, as well as the co-host of the Drive-In Asylum feature with double feature with Bill. And our second guest, it's my honor to introduce the co-host of one of the greatest podcasts of all time, one that inspired me to start my own podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, from the B Movie Cast, please welcome also Juan Ortiz. Welcome to the show, Juan.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure being on the show here tonight. Yes, B Movie Cast, I tell you, it's been going on for, I would say, close to like 13 or 14 years. And I started back with the cast back in 2009. And of course, the creator of the podcast, Vince Rotolo, did pass away a few years ago. And so now we're down to the 3, which is me, Mary Rotolo, Vince's wife, and of course, Nick Brown, who's the co-host author of the show that does a lot of the editing and the programming for our shows, for our episodes. So yeah, it's an honor being on your show tonight, Roger, and having me on. And yes, I'm also the owner of my website is fifthdimensionfilms.net. And I have Fifth Dimension Film Collectibles. I do a lot of conventions and stuff, and I'm in the circuit. Mostly all the horror conventions, a lot of the monster ones up north and down here in Florida. I'm from Florida, by the way, guys. And so, yeah, I stay pretty active in the circuit. And pretty much when we do the conventions, we try to get our podcast family together to come and join us at these conventions, which they do. And we get a lot of, our B-Movie Cast fan club is pretty big now. So I'm pretty, I'm proud of the show, and it's a great show. It's been going on for many, many years, and we're going to continue as long as we can.
Awesome, awesome. And Sam, did you want to talk about your website a little bit?
Sure. Hey, I'm Sam from BNS About Movies, which is a site about way too many movies. I usually watch around 50 or 60 movies a week, and I write about them. Generally, I try to keep everything every week kind of in one format. So this week's all movies with strong and powerful female heroines. Last week was all superhero movies because obviously Thor was out. So I'm like, what? There's a million other Thor movies that people made to cash in on Thor. Let's talk about those ones instead of the real one. And I love Mexican wrestling and Mexican horror, and I actually trained in Lucha Libre and have been a pro wrestler for 26 years. So I don't really wrestle Lucha Libre style anymore. I wrestle more like Psycho Clown. So like more brawling and hardcore stuff, but I do love wrestling, and I'm a good base. I'm a good Rudo. Can't do any can't do a hurricanrana, can't do any dives or anything, but I do love it, and excited to talk about these movies. They're very dear to my heart. And one of my students, I trained wrestlers for a long time. One of my friends is in NXT for WWE now, and he teams with Fantasma Jr. or El Hijo del Fantasma, whose father is in 2 Mexican horror movies. We'll probably talk about this week. He plays Tarzan in Intrepidos Punks and La Magazia de los Punks. And when he asked him, when he met him, he said, I saw those movies and they're wild. And he was like, no one in the U.S. has ever seen those movies. He said, oh, I know one maniac that loves those movies. So it made me really happy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And for the folks at home, in case you haven't figured out already, our topic today is Mexican horror movies and luchador films. There's so much to this topic, folks, and so we may end up going late, just to warn you. But Juan, before we even begin, can you just show us your T-shirt? You were showing it to us before we started.
Sure, this is one of my many T-shirts that I wear and I have. Some of these I've gotten from Mexico, directly from Mexico, but this is one of my favorites. It's the Leyendas. It's the Legends of Lucha Libre. And in here we have, let me roll my camera down a little bit so you could see. There they are. I've got Santo, el Enmascarado de Plata right here. And next to him is Blue Demon. This is Blue Demon, not Blue Demon Jr. And then on the other side is Mil Máscaras with his original trade mask. He's the luchador of 1,000 masks because he has so many different styles of masks. This is his favorite, but there's a gold one that looks just like this one. And there's many, many other ones that Mil Máscaras wears. But he's basically known for this particular mask. And right up above here, we have another legendary luchador. His name is Huracán Ramirez. And he's been in the circuit. He's been around for many, many years. He's a legendary wrestler also that has been in quite a few films with Mil Máscaras, with Santo, and with Blue Demon, in which I'll talk about one of the films that they all 4 were in. Okay, so that's my shirt.
Awesome.
Very
awesome.
nice.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start off with what my understanding of the early history of Mexican horror films is, and then you guys can come in after I'm done and either correct me or fill in the details, okay?
Fine, yeah.
Okay. So my understanding is that when Dracula came out in 1931, it was a huge hit. In particular, in Mexico, there was a Spanish language version that was filmed simultaneously, like at night when the daytime crew was done with the American version with Bela Lugosi. The Spanish crew would film the night version. So that particular version, from what I understand, had huge impact in Mexico. However, they weren't really playing horror movies to mainstream audiences at that point, even though it was a big hit. You know, horror wasn't accepted into the mainstream until, for theater goers anyways, until probably the 1950s. But we had a movie in 57 called El Vampiro, which is sort of, at least in the book I read, which is called, and I'll hold this up here if you guys can see it, it's called The Mexican Masked Wrestler and Monster Filmography. Hopefully you guys can all see that there.
Yes, I want to make a quick comment on that book, Roger. Can you hold that back up again?
Oh, yeah, sure,
That
sure.
book? Yes, that book right there was done by one of my close friends. He passed away, by the way, Roberto Bob Carter. He's the author of that book. And that is pretty much a very good detailed biography of a lot of the Mexican horror films and lucha films. But Bob Carter, which every year we've gotten together at the Monster Bash in Pennsylvania. And, dear friend of mine, he did pass away a few years back, but he was the host of the Mexican movie night at the Monster Bash every Friday. And he always dressed up as Kolchak from the Night Stalker. He would go on the stage and he would introduce the Mexican horror film for that night in his Kolchak outfit. He had his camera and his white outfit with his hat. It wasn't a Santo outfit or nothing like that. But he wrote that book, and it's an amazing book, and I got to hand it to him for doing that. I wish another one would have came out. There's other books that came out, but that's one of the more desired books of Bob Carter.
Right. Well, I'm sorry to hear about that, man. I had no idea, and my apologies and my condolences to Bob and his family and you guys. It's an amazing book because I learned as I said, horror wasn't accepted in mainstream theatrical audiences in Mexico until the 1950s, and in '57 you had a movie called El Vampiro, which is credited as being the one that sort of put horror on the map for Mexico. I mean, that movie even ended up on the cover of Famous Monsters magazine. The Universal horrors, like I said, they hadn't been playing them in the theaters there, so they weren't done to death, but they were still new in Mexico. So at the time, they started coming up with their own versions of Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman and all the others. But then you had, at a later point, you had the Luchador films, also called Lucha Libre, which didn't instantly spring up. They started to. There were four films that supposedly, as far as I know, and you guys can correct me when I'm done. These four films sort of defined what lucha libre films would be, and these include El Enmascarado de Plata from '52, Hurricane Ramirez from '52, La Sombra Vengadora from '54, and Ladron de Cadaveras from '56, which I'm probably butchering those words, so I apologize. But you guys, does that sound right? Did I get any of that right?
Yeah, yes. Let me add on to that a little bit, Roger. Here, the first one you mentioned was true. It was 1953, El Enmascarado de Plata, which is a silver masked man. That particular film, and I just want to just cover a little bit on that, was the film that originally Santo, El Enmascarado de Plata, was supposed to have the lead role in that film, and he turned it down. So what happened was, it was a film based off of a serial that was done in Mexico back in the early 50s. It was like a chapter serial in episodes, episode 1, 2. It was like maybe 6 or 7 episodes or 9 episodes. So what they do is they featured it together in a full-length feature. El Santo refused the role because he was busy with this wrestling. He was very active at that time, believe it or not. He was doing a lot of wrestling in Arena Mexico, Arena Mexico, and he was involved in the circuit, very, very, very active. So his mind wasn't into acting or being a movie star or nothing like that at that time yet. But he turned the movie down, and the role went to another famous luchador. His name is El Médico Asesino. Is the medical assassin is his name, and he was very similar to Santo. He had a white mask and everything, but he wore like a doctor's smock outfit. And that was his costume. He had like a doctor's smock outfit, the white mask. And in 1953, the movie was done with him, El Enmascarado de Plata. But believe it or not, Santo, if you look at that film, he was in the film indirectly as one of the bad guys. There was 2 villains in that film. There was El Tigre, and of course El Tigre was the one that had a silver mask, a Santos mask with stripes in it. And then was another one, so 2 of them in there, plus the fact that El Médico Asesino, he was like the good guy in this, instead of being a rudo, he was a technical luchador, and he was fighting. It was basically about a scientific experiment where they wanted to control the weather, and it was world disasters and everything. So, but René Cardona, who happens to be in the film, he also has co-parting and directing of the film, did the film. So that was actually the film to start, like you said, in 1953, the genre of many luchador films to come after that. But Santo, he turned down the role. He didn't accept that role because he was busy with the wrestling. And then later on in '59 is when he really came into the scene, which we'll talk about that shortly. But then in the other film you mentioned, Huracán Ramirez, yes, he had an early film in the '50s, and that was his origin film. It was not a horror film or nothing like that. It was basically an action type film with him being introduced into the wrestling scene and a lot of wrestling going on. So it's more of that kind of a film. It wasn't really a genre horror film per se with Huracán. Then after that, you mentioned El Ladrón de Cadáveres. Right. El Ladrón de Cadáveres is the body snatcher. Now that movie came out in 1957, 58, 57, and it had one of the greatest legendary, to me, actors and wrestlers of Mexico, who was born in Spain. His name was Wolf Rubinsky. Now, Wolf Rubinsky was the lead character in Ladrón de Cadáveres, which is the body snatchers. And that was a horror film. It involved this detective and it involved this scientist who's trying to get luchadors, and it's the brain thing, if you know what I mean. They always wanted to get the brains of luchador and put them into other people, other luchadors, and make, like robots out of that. And so Wolf Rubinsky was the lead character who later on, it turned out there was a lot of wrestling here, and he became a hideous creature at the very end. As a matter of fact, that photo was in Famous Monsters #1. It was one of the pictures in Famous Monsters #1. But Ladrón de Cadáveres, yes, that was in 57. 58, right after that, in 57, then came the famous Fernando Mendez's El Vampiro with Herman Robles. That was the movie that started, like we said, the trend of all the later day Mexican horror films from 1957 on. That went on for many, many years. It went on for a span of maybe 20 or 30 years.
Right.
So yeah, what you said was true on those films. Yes.
And to build on the amazing analysis you just gave, Medico Asino would have been a really big star, but unfortunately he got sick in 1958 and died in 1960. He had been wrestling in Texas, and he was a huge star in the U.S., which there wasn't a lot of crossover at that point with luchadors in America outside of border cities like Texas. And when he came back to Mexico in 58, people were shocked because he was a really large guy, larger than Santo. Yes, and he lost almost half his body weight from being sick. And luckily he had bought life insurance when wrestling in Texas and was able to pay for his family. And then I think the other amazing thing is that Santo didn't really play Santo as we know him until Santo Contra Los Zombies. And he was 41 years old when he finally made his first role. And I think one of the things to know about lucha, which is way different than American wrestling, is there's always been a theory of not overexposing yourself, because unlike America, especially in Arena Mexico and around Mexico City, there might be 14 matches at 14 different shows in Mexico City on a good Sunday. On Friday night is usually the big Arena Mexico show, but even in the 80s, when AAA broke off from CMLL, which are the two largest companies in Mexican wrestling, AAA was really derided in Mexico City because they ran TV. No one ran TV and showed lucha on TV. Like in America, we're used to Raw and Nitro and these shows that, TV is everything and building to pay-per-view. In Mexico, it's still pay-per-views and still kind of in its infancy, and it's about going to the live shows. So a lot of the wrestlers were like, well, why should I be in a movie and everybody goes to pay me and sees me for less than they would come to see me in a show, and I'm going to lose my popularity? Kind of Santo learned after the third movie that, oh wait, this really actually works and it's less wear and tear on me, and I can kind of start to build people. And by that point, I'm sure Juan will get into this, there's wrestlers that literally were wrestlers just for movies. Some of them actually became real wrestlers, which is the backwards way that Santo came in. And some were just wrestlers just for movies, which it gets really interesting. And there are also comic book wrestlers, like Mil Mascara started as a comic book character and was a bodybuilder, not a wrestler, and needed trained. But it's really amazing how these movies start. And my favorite thing about the mass wrestling movies are Santo's movies, especially, they hop genre unlike any other. Imagine if James Bond was suddenly in a giallo, or James Bond was in a werewolf movie, or James Bond was in a space movie, or James Bond went to Atlantis, the Bermuda Triangle. Santo did all those things and more, and is still Santo, and across 60 to 70 movies. And that's why he's amazing, is that his character is durable even as he ages. It doesn't really matter. He's still Santo. And
that's one of my favorite things about those movies is that they present these wrestlers who are in full character and costume, and they're just intermingling with ordinary people.
Oh yeah,
that's an amazing quality of those films.
Polo shirts, and they go out and solve crimes. I love it.
Yeah,
I love that in Santo and the one Dracula E El Sexo is the uncensored name of it, but Santo gets called in to talk to people about a time machine idea and Santo is considered on the same level as these learned scientists.
Yes.
And he is basically in the 60s movies, like post 65, Santo is very close to Batman. He has the phone to reach the police, and the adventures look kind of like the Adam West Batmans. By the 70s, they get even weirder. The last two Santo movies, one of them shot in Coral Castle in Florida, they're insane. Like the Bermuda Triangle ones near the end are all wild and kind of get martial arts into them. Martial arts are very big in lucha at that time too, because martial arts were considered a foul. So if you used karate strikes, it was like that you would literally die in the ring. You would be hurt by it because it was a strange mystery to people there. So the last thing I'll say before I jump out too, before any of these movies, I think the thing that gets me obsessed about Mexican movies are Mexico is such a Catholic culture. So you will see more religion and Catholicism in these movies, and like people praying to God before they fight a monster, crucifixes used against all kinds of monsters. And it's something that doesn't happen in our culture. So when it happens in these movies, it's always like, wow, like that's the joy of it to me, because this is an entirely different world that is not our own. And that's what's worse. In the same way that the films of any country, Japan or Hong Kong or any country, and they have their own rules, but Mexican movies really don't seem to have any rules, which is why I love them.
That's one of the reasons I love them too. So, I was actually going to try and start talking about just general horror movies, but I like
Yeah.
the fact that we're on this the luchador track. So let's continue with that. And by the way, if anyone needs to take a break for whatever reason, just mute your camera and microphone, and we'll know that you're taking a break. Um, but so in talking about the lucha libre films, which the big thing about them is that, like we said, they don't star actors. These guys are themselves. They're the wrestlers. They're the hero, not only in the movies but in real life. Santo was the hero, whether he was on the big screen or in the ring fighting bad guys. This is different. That we see heroes on film, but like it's played by Michael Keaton or this actor or that actor. It's not it's fake. But this, quote unquote, is kind of real because it's Santo. He's Santo, whether he's in the movie or in real life, and he's going up against Dr. Frankenstein and all these insane monsters and stuff. So, and I love the fact that they have to wear their masks all the time, and there's a whole story behind that. So, Juan, I wanted to know if you could sort of get into the luchadors and why they have to wear the masks, and sort of explain that to our viewers.
Sure. Well, basically, just to take the concept, I'm going to go back a little bit. First of all, we're going to talk, since our main luchador star is El Santo. I'm going to go talk a little bit about him. I'm going to go back to his early beginnings. Okay. Now, Santo, his name was Rodolfo Guzman Huerta. Okay. And he was born in 1917 in Tulancingo, Hidalgo, Mexico. And it's amazing because during that time, the early beginning of the century, 1917, when he was 10 years old and 27, he was already very active and wanted to employ in doing a lot of physical activity and sports. He got into judo, he got into different kinds of things, and he was very, very athletic. So by 1927, he was already opening and paving the way to what he really wanted to be in life. And he left Hidalgo, Tulancingo, and he went to Mexico City. And then in the 1930s, the early 30s and into the mid 30s is where he really picked up. He wanted to become a luchador. And back in those days, luchadors, it was the early stages. There was a lot of like sumo wrestling involved. It was a that kind of the Spanish wrestling. It was all put together. So at that time, Rodolfo Guzman Huerta, he didn't have a mask. The beginnings of how he got his mask came much later when, he actually fought and wrestled without a mask. He had various names. He was called El Murciélago Dos, which is the Bat 2. He had couple of different names, and he did wear a cape, but he didn't have a mask so you could see his face. This was back in 37, 38. So what happened was he got to meet a trainer that had the trio of luchadors got together, and he wanted to put names with them. So the trainer asked Rodolfo. He says, "Listen, I want you guys to pick out a name that's going to stick with you as a legendary, so you become a wrestler known by that name." So Santo was offered the name of the devil, which is El Diablo, the demon. He was offered the name of the angel, El Ángel, and he was offered the name of the saint, El Santo. So he chose, of the three, he chose El Santo. From then on is when he went into the circuit and started wrestling in the late 30s into the 40s, and he started wearing the silver mask. Now, What happened was much later, other luchadors were coming into the circuit. There was many, many luchadors. In his films, and a lot of the Santo films, there's a lot of known actors and luchadors. Wolf Rubinsky was a luchador. And I got to mention Fernando Oces, Fernando Oces was actually the guy that got Santo into the films. And he was also a very prominent wrestler in the 1950s. There was another luchador called El Lobo Negro, the Black Shadow, which happened to be the partner of Blue Demon. And they tag team and formed the legendary Shadow Brothers in the early 50s, which Santo, there was a lot of tag team matches. And what Sam mentioned about the technical and the rudo, you had two sides to a wrestler. He was either a good wrestler or he was either an evil or a bad wrestler. And they fought for two different things. They fought for the hair and they fought for the mask. So basically what happened was in the tag team match in 1953, where Santo, it was a tag team with 4 luchadors. You had Blue Demon and you had Black Shadow and Santo, and then you have El Rayo de Jalisco. He was another known great luchador, by the way, Rayo de Jalisco. Their sons carry on the generations now, like Blue Demon Jr. and a lot of the other ones. But that particular match in 53 is when Santo demasked Black Shadow. So what happens when you demask a wrestler that has a mask? That's it. He loses his status. He's no longer a legend. He doesn't wear the mask, so he doesn't have the fame anymore. Which later on, Black Shadow went on to be in many of Santo's films. Black Shadow was in the movies without a mask wrestling, and he wrestled against Santo. But that's the situation with the mask. Now, Blue Demon was another story. He's got a whole story on himself. That's another story. But in the beginning, when these matches were going on in the early 50s and in throughout the 50s, other great luchadors came into the scene. And the mask was a form of identity for them. In other words, when they wore the mask, it was an identity for them where people wanted to know who is the mysterious man behind that mask. El Santo, Mascarado de Plata, is a legend in itself because he never took his mask off. He was never demasked. He never lost his mask. He won all his matches, except he did lose a match against Blue Demon, and he lost a couple matches, but it wasn't involving where he had to take his mask off or nothing like that. And nobody never saw his face, though there are a few people that have he had demasked for them in film. Talk about that in a little bit. But that trend went on, and this is the reason how Arena Mexico and Mexico and a lot of these luchadors were very well known and very famous throughout primarily the 50s into the later part of the 50s, when a lot of them got so much recognition. And Santo, again, wanted to, he was approached by Fernando Oces and says, listen, I'm doing 2 films in Cuba in 1959, and I want you to be a part of it. I feel that, you have a lot of talent and, your physiques as a wrestler, and you attain some kind of legendary status. I want you to be in these films. And Fernando says he actually, along with the director of the film, whose name was Miguelito Rodriguez, or Joselito Rodriguez, they went to Cuba and they shot the first 2 films that El Santo did. This was in 1959, by the way. Santo versus the Zombies was a much later film that came out in 64, after he had done various other films, which I'm going to highlight real quick here in a little bit. But this first movie that he did was in Cuba by Joselito Rodriguez, called Santo versus the Evil Brain, Santo contra los cerebros infernales. Okay, El cerebro del mal. And then the second film that same year that he did, it was back to back in Cuba, was Santo versus the Infernal Men, Santo contra los hombres infernales. Both Fernando Oces and Santo were in the film. In the first one, Fernando was a black luchador. He was a luchador with a black mask. His name was Incognito. So Santo didn't have he was like a secondary character in that film. He really wasn't known. They didn't use his name. Santo was never mentioned throughout the film, believe it or not. He was called the agent. He was simply called El Agente, but he was there. He was like a secret agent or a policeman that came to help in the case of with Joaquin Cordero, and involving mostly mafia type gangsters and that kind of a scientist trying to make a machine and things like that. But there was no monsters or nothing involved with that. The first two films that he did in 1959 didn't get shown and didn't get released until 1961. And those were the first two official films that El Santo did to get him into the spotlight, which he really wasn't. He wasn't. But where he really got into the spotlight was after that in 1961 and 62 and 63. And I'll cover those. I got some visuals I would like to show too. So, but that's basically how the trend, how these luchadors, the mask, the identity, becoming, keeping it a secret, held the public, all the fans that used to go to Arena Mexico to watch all these lucha libre films they were mesmerized by seeing these masked luchadors and say, who's behind that mask? And they will win the matches, and they were all for Santo, Blue Demon, whoever it was, Huracán Ramirez, Mil Máscaras, you mentioned La Sombra Vengadora. He was a famous wrestler also, but his status didn't go through into making a lot of movies. He did do a lot of movies. He did like 6 films, and he did a couple of Western films, believe it or not. He did some Western films, but the main guys that really got into the spotlight very quick was, besides El Santo, was Blue Demon, who was a secondary. It was Mil Máscaras and Huracán Ramirez. Those were the 4 that really got into the spotlight before all the other ones came into play later on in the 60s and the 70s, of course, in late 70s, where the trend died off towards the end of the 70s, in that decade, to the early 80s. Santo's last film, by the way, was Santo and the Fury of the Fighting Goddess in 1984. And that was his very last film that he did in color. And shortly after that, he did a show in Mexico called Contrapunto, where, after so many years, he did 52 films. Santo did 52 films altogether. And in that show in Mexico, Contrapunto, he was, Wolf Rubinsky was there, Min Mascaras was there, and Santo was there. Of course, that was in 1984, and that was in December of 1984. And what happened then, and this is after he had fought his final match in Arena Mexico with his son. His son, El Hijo del Santo, was with him, and he fought that match, that legendary last match that he won, and he attained his belt. So he was always a champion. But then what happened was, he feared that he was dying. This man knew that death was soon to come. So on that show, what he did that nobody expected, it was a total surprise, he pulled his mask off, and he let millions of viewers to see his face in Contrapunto on that particular TV show. And he just pulled it up a little bit to show his face, and then he pulled it back down. But that was an indication to let his fans and his people know that he wasn't going to be around for too much longer. And lo and behold, that following year in 1983, 84, in February of 1984, Santo passed away, or 85, he passed away. And the honors were that he was to be buried with his mask, and he did get buried with his traditional mask on. And it was a funeral that was amazing in Mexico. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people showed up for that, including, of course, the legendary wrestlers that carried his casket, or carried him to the mausoleum, where he got interned into a mausoleum, which is now a lot of people that go to. I have been there. I visited his grave, and I visited his hometown in Tulancingo, Hidalgo. There's a giant statue there of him in the plaza, and it's really an honor. Even a museum. There's a museum there that has a lot of the artifacts, his costume, a lot of the films and everything. But he was totally a legend. And like what Sam mentioned about going on and becoming worldwide known, not just the films, but for everything that he did, the wrestling, he was really like a superhero. He was truly a superhero without superpowers, just being who he was and creating that legendary character of El Santo. So, that's basically it about the luchadors and how, the mask and, how they gain the identity and they lose the identity, if they lose their mask or their hair. and so forth, you know.
Right, right. And I know, Sam, you're probably dying to jump in, but I just want to just step in for a second and
Sure.
just say,
Sorry I took so
you know,
long there.
No, it's
question-
good. This is great.
so these guys, these luchadors, in real life, they wore their masks all the time, just like in the movies. Like, you know, Santos in his polo shirt and blazer, and he's going off to solve crimes. But that's how they were in real life, right?
hmm Yeah, one of my trainers wrestled for WWE back when it was WWF in 78 to 81. And when Mil Mascaras was there and wrestling in Madison Square Garden, and he said Mil would wear his mask into the shower and everybody would make fun of him. And he'd say, well, this is how I've always done it. He had a mask just to wear into the shower. And then, you know, he said occasionally we'd see someone that looked like Slim Whitman kind of, and we figured that was probably Mil, very muscular Slim Whitman. But he said, yeah, he kept it up all the time when they'd get to a town. You know, he would put a towel over his head. He would put the mask on. Like I just saw a picture of Mystico flying last week, and he wore his mask on the plane. I mean, this is, you know, when you're in public, it's a big, even today, it's a big deal when a picture of a luchador gets out without his mask on. So yeah, it is pretty astounding. And to build on Santo's legacy, like Santo made so many other wrestlers big deals. There's a 6-man team called the Missionaries de la Muerte, the Death Missionaries. And Santo actually had a heart attack in 1981 in the ring with them, with Negro Navarro, El Signo, and El Texano. And that's how they were called. They're still, Negro Navarro still wrestles today. He's amazing. And he still referred to him as a death missionary. I never knew what that meant because it was 40 years ago. And I had to find like, oh yeah, he was in the ring when Santo almost died. And their whole gimmick were they were the 3 men that almost killed Santo. They got the closest to defeating him. So I think that's what's amazing. And Mil Mascaras has, especially worldwide fame. In Japan in the 80s, he was the biggest deal. He and his brother Dos Caras and a little smaller El Psicodelico, their third brother, were huge deals in all Japan pro wrestling, to the fact that they influenced another wrestler, Tiger Mask, and that wrestler influenced every junior heavyweight wrestler that came afterwards. And it's all from Mil. When you go to Japan, there's still Mil Mascaras merchandise everywhere. He still wrestled there up until a couple of years ago. He would still do his crossbody dive off the top. He didn't ever make anyone else look good. That's really the difference with Mil. Mil isn't as well thought of in wrestling as, especially Blue Demon has always been super well thought of amongst wrestlers. But yeah, Mil Mascaras was, I can't even quantify what a big deal he is in Mexico.
Well, as you saw in the video we played at the beginning, Blue Demon's a huge guy.
Yeah.
So
Blue Demon's my favorite of if I have to pick between Santo or Blue. I love Santo, but Blue Demon has just like a certain toughness to him and like an edge, and I love Blue Demon.
yeah,
That's why he's my favorite too.
Yeah.
I love them both. It's funny. The thing is about these luchador movies, and I was trying to explain this to someone recently, is they're just so insane, and they take everything, including the kitchen sink and the bathtub and everything else, and they just throw it into these movies, and it just works somehow. Even though, you know, they're low budget and maybe sometimes the acting or the dialogue is not great, but that might depend on who's translating the film. But they're just so much fun. I can't get enough of these films. I mean, I think I watched all the ones on Tubi, and I know there's hundreds more that I haven't seen. Although I do have one. I did buy from you years ago the one of the Neutron films. I can't remember. It was about the 3 scientists and the aliens that came in and took their bodies or something. I forget which one that was, but Neutron was another wrestler, right? Now was he pre Santo, or was he around the same time?
I can cover that. Neutron. As a matter of fact, I've got some visuals over here. I want to show you a visuals here, if you don't mind. I do have quite a bit of visuals I wanted to show. I wanted to share with everybody here. Let me get my I have a Neutron, one of the Neutrons over here. Actually, they had the last 2 movies that he did. Let's see, where is it? Because I got the Santo. I got a lot of Santos here that I want to cover, but the Neutrons. Oh, here it is. Okay, I got him with my Blue Demon. So basically, I'm just going to show you this. Okay, this is Neutron, and of course you see it's Wolf Rinsky. But this right here was Neutron, was Asesinos de It's right here. It says Los Asesinos del Karate. And the other film was actually like a sixth film that he did called El Asesino Invisible, The Invisible Assassin. Now, what I wanted to talk about Neutron here was Neutron came in the early 60s, in 1961, 62, and he was a mass wrestler. Wolf Rubinsky was the role of Neutron throughout the entire 5 films, or the 6 films that they did. The first one, there was a trilogy of 3 films that Neutron did involving another masked villain called Dr. Caronte. Now, Dr. Caronte was trying to steal a serum for what they call a neutron bomb that they were building. A scientist, and Neutron gets involved. Dr. Caronte and his minion, he's got a little tiny minion with him, and his army of death robots. They're like zombie robots. They try to take over and steal the formula for the neutron bomb. So the first movie that Neutron did was Neutron, El Enmascarado Negro, Neutron and the Black Mask. The second one that he did was called Neutron los Automatas de la Muerte, in the Robots of Death, which were the zombie robots, was the second one. Then the third one was Neutron versus Dr. Caronte. Now, there was a trilogy of 3 Neutron films with Dr. Caronte and the evil robots and the minion, and the secret about the neutron bomb and stealing the formula to make the bomb. Then on the 4th film, actually that was the last of the 3 with Wolf Rubinsky, but he went on to do a 4th and a 5th film that had nothing to do with Dr. Caronte in the first 3. It was called Neutron versus the Maniac, which was actually, it was a movie about like a Jack the Ripper type, House of Wax character type that was going around with a knife trying to stab. It was a serial killer, and Neutron was involved in that. But his mask was his mask for that. He didn't have the lightning bolts that came across his mask, the black lightning bolts. He had a straight bolt that came down his face. He did change his mask. And there's a picture of it there, if you can see it. Okay, right there. So Neutron versus the Maniac, and then there was actually a 6th film, but it was a totally different outfit and a character, and his name was El Asesino Invisible, and the character was the Gold Avenger. He was a masked wrestler. It was no throne, but he was the Gold Avenger, and that was the movie right there. So yeah, he only did 5 movies actually, but the 5 films that he did, they were great because Wolf Rubinsky, they were all in there. You had Julio Aleman, you had Armando Silvestre. It was pretty good, though there was a lot of song and dance. There was, there was no wrestling, mind you, no wrestling. There was a lot of musical numbers and things like that. So, but the movies were great. The Neutron movies were short. They were very good. And of course, I got to mention that K. Gordon Murray did do the English dubs to all these films. He was very primary on that.
What would we have done without K. Gordon Murray?
And Dr. Caronte was such a big deal that there's at least 8 wrestlers or 10 wrestlers that used his gimmick. And Mystico, who's pretty much the Santo of the 2000s, his father wrestled as Dr. Caronte in the 80s and 90s, and which is, and his whole family. That's the other thing, like you mentioned before, and within Lucha Libre, there's whole families that are whole lines of people that you can connect. Just connecting the Los Brazos family, there's almost 30 or 40 people in that family are all active pro wrestlers. Some are luchadores, some are technicos, some are rudos. Sometimes they don't even mention that they're related because they don't want you to know they're related. Unlike, you'll know, the other thing I learned when I first started was if someone is El Hijo or El Hija, they're definitely related. If they're junior, they might be a nephew or a cousin, or they may have bought the gimmick. Or if they're a 2 after, they may have literally paid for the mask and bought the mask, or they've been given it by their trainer. That's why Rey Mysterio Jr. is a junior. His uncle, Rey Mysterio, gave him the mask when he started. And you said earlier, too, Santos started at 10. Rey Mysterio started training at 12 years old. In the U.S., you usually can't start till you're 16 or 17. Most luchadors start, and especially family-based luchadors, start even earlier even before their teens at learning how to do things. And some of them, like Ray wrestled as Hummingbird was his first name in Lucha, and he wrestled as a mini, as a Estrelita, smaller, because in Mexico there's size classes. So you'll see mini wrestlers who were sometimes smaller versions of the larger wrestlers. And that's where Rey Mysterio started until he was like 17, because his uncle wouldn't give him the names. He didn't think he had earned it. So he wrestled him. He would do his math homework in the locker room, he said to me, and then finish his math, and it'd be time to go out and do a match. And he promised his mom he would finish high school before he got it. When he finished high school, he got the name. And of course, now he's probably in the U.S. outside of Santos and Mill, probably the best known luchador, I would say, in the U.S.
That's funny. That's awesome. And I'm gonna just step away for a second to see if I can find which Neutron movie it is I have on DVD. I'm gonna grab that real quick. But I wanted to throw the question out there. Wasn't Santo called in America? He was called Samson in some of the early translations. Is that correct?
You can blame K. Gordon Murray for that one too.
Right. K. Gordon Murray, I want to add on, he was basically the innovator of what happened with a lot of these Mexican horror films, including El Vampiro and a lot of the other ones that we'll talk about here shortly. But the Santo films, he did 4 Santo films. He dubbed them into horrible English, and that's what his trademark was known for, his real bad dubbing. And he did it right out of a studio here in Florida, down here in Coral Blades or Coral Blades, and it was Lab Sound Studios, I believe it was, and that's where he did it there. And he paid a lot of people just to do the dubbing, the Santo the dubbing. He changed the name to Samson because the fact that he didn't want to get hit with a trademark infringement by using the actual name of El Santo. So that's why he changed it to Samson.
He also took a lot of the serials, like the Nostradamus serial, and broke it into 4 movies. Do you know what I mean? Like he would, because American audiences were already away from serials, and he wasn't as bad as there's, Jerry Warren's much worse at just combining movies to make something, but still the dubbing is not, it's much different when you watch the movies now. Like Curse of the Aztec Mummy is much different than You
mentioned Sam. You mentioned the Nostradamus films. You're right.
Yeah.
So basically, what happened the series with that? K. Gordon Murray did dub into English the 4 Nostradamus films that Herman Robles and Julia Alemán did, Domingo Soler, and this was from 1962 through 1964, and the movies, he did the dubbing on them, and it turned out to be that those were the hits that became here late night, midnight, chiller watching at the weekends, chiller theater type on Saturdays and Friday nights. And I just want to show you real quick. Did you mention Nostradamus? Here they are, right here. This is the first one. That's the Curse of Nostradamus right there. Okay. The second one was the Genie of Darkness. I don't know if you can see that one there. There's Herman right there, Herman. Okay. The third one was the Monster Demolisher right there. And I want to share that. That's K. Gordon Murray, and that's the Monster awesome. Demolisher. Here's the back of it. This is what the lobby card shot of it right there. Okay. And then the final film that he did was The Blood of Nostradamus. And there it is right there. Okay. This one right here was in 1966. It was actually the last film that the Nostradamus series for the 4 films. Now, these movies were actually from a serial, again, because there was a lot of serials in Mexico. There was quite a few horror ones. So what they did is they condensed the serials into 4 films, giving them 3 chapters or 3 episodes per movie, making it a 12-chapter serial to conclude the Nostradamus, the vampire trilogy with Herman Robles. And that's how it went.
And Jack Taylor's in all those movies, who was in literally every country. He's in Jess Franco movies. He's in Pieces. He's in The Ghost Galleon. His career went from the whole way from America to Mexico to all over the place. So it feels like every time you watch an exploitation movie, no matter what country, there's a 90% chance Jack Taylor's going to show up in it. He's in Conan the Barbarian. He's a priest in Conan. Like, it's just crazy how many movies he's in. He's in 125 movies.
That's crazy. Him and Hugo Stiglitz, because when I was watching a lot of the Mexican horror films to prepare for this, I saw Hugo Stiglitz in at least like 3.
Oh yeah, I love him.
But I wanted to touch briefly upon, you guys had mentioned, of course, I couldn't find the DVD. I think it's the second one. No, Neutron versus the robots.
Yeah, it's Neutron contra los automatas de la muerte. It's Neutron versus the death robots.
Yes.
That's the second one
that I have on DVD that I got from you one. But there's a handful of series. You guys just touched upon like the Nostradamus series, but even El Vampiro had a couple of sequels. There's the Aztec Mummy films. Can you guys elaborate on those?
Sure. I'll let me pull up my visual on that. Okay, just want to. Okay, so basically, this El Vampiro. Here it is.
Yes.
And this happens to be the out of print Casa Negra version that is no longer. The company went bankrupt, by the way. Great company, and they did so many. They did about 8 of the Mexican horror films. I'm going to show you real quick the titles that they did. But El Vampiro, this was like one of the famous ones besides the Brainiac. But this right here was the film that Fernando Mendes put into the spotlight to get Herman Robles in the trademark Dracula character, that it was so much refined, close to the Universal Dracula. Yeah. Because the atmosphere of this film was very gothic, and it looked like a Universal film, Universal monster film. So basically, this DVD collection here has both versions. It has the vampire, El Vampiro, and the vampire's coffin, which is El Ataúd del Vampiro. Both of them on here. And what's really cool about this series from Casa Negra, they went ahead and put the English versions, the Spanish versions, the Spanish with English subtitles, and there was so much stuff on here as far as like the special features. It covered a little bit of the Mexican horror genre back during that time. Fernando Mendes was the innovator, but we got to thank another actor that was very prolific and later on carrying this tradition. His name was Abel Salazar. And Abel Salazar, he was in this film, by the way. Abel Salazar went on to do many, many films. He's known basically his famous film, The Brainiac. But Salazar and his brother Alfredo Salazar, they created what's called the APSA company. Okay, and this was done right after they did this film. Salazar brothers went on and created this company, and they put together an array of horror films between 1958 and 1966, 67. Amazing Mexican horror films. So basically, but this is the one that kind of started it off right here. Okay, was El Vampiro. And Herman Robles, this character is known. He was at the 2017 or the 2016 Monster Bash in Pennsylvania. And I had the honor of meeting Herman Robles. He was, he passed away a few years ago. And I met him and we shared some great stories together. I knew everything about the film, but then so many other films that he did, because he crossed over into a lot of the horror films throughout the late 50s and early 60s and mid 60s, and even some of the luchador films. He was in the last Neutron film, Neutron versus the Karate Assassins. Herman Robles was in that. Wow. But anyway, he was, and Herman wasn't Mexican. He was born in Spain. He came from Spain at a young age to Mexico. There was a lot of actors that come from Spain. They're born in Argentina and Spain, and they go to Mexico, and that's where they make it big over there. So anyway, yeah, that's El Vampiro. And I got to say, let me pull the other one out over here.
Just to build on, Vampiro had elongated fangs a year before Hammer did it too. Which is amazing. There's only one other movie that had elongated fangs, and I don't doubt anyone saw it. The Finnish movie Valkoinen Puera, which is the White Reindeer. It's a movie about a woman who's a reindeer.
Yes, I'm very familiar with that film. Yeah. I have a Blu-ray of that, The White Reindeer. Yeah. It's a Norwegian fantasy horror film, and basically it's a white reindeer, but actually she becomes the white reindeer who's also a vampire.
Yeah.
And it's all through this giant totem pole out in the middle of, and it's really a really weird film, but it is a fantasy horror film. And The White Reindeer is also one. These Swedish and Norwegian and Swedish films and horror films are very, very good. I mean, it's a genre all in itself.
I think that probably Hammer may not have seen either. They may have seen the Vampiro because it was in Famous Monsters, but I don't know if they got to Finland and so I'm not sure if they saw that. But I think it's really interesting of how close El Vampiro is to where Hammer went. It's like almost like a step in between Universal the Hammer. It's like a neat, like, kind of get you the rest of the way there.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Sam, your audio sounds like all of a sudden you're far away.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I moved this out of the way. Apologies.
No problem. No problem. I mean, this is awesome. So I just want to explain to the people at home who are listening, they might be confused because we've been talking about Mexican horror films, and we kind of started off with the luchador films, which are awesome in and of themselves. But the Mexico also just has horror. They're not wrestling movies. They're not wrestling horror movies. So as Juan explained, you had El Vampiro and a bunch of others as the conversation went on. So let's get into that a little bit, because I'm telling you right now, I watched, Sam, you were kind enough to send me a letterbox list of movies, and I found a bunch that I loved. I had, hold on, let me get my notes here so I can remember what films I saw. Well, first of all, let me say that, like, many years ago, I purchased The Brainiac on DVD.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It was just one of those films. I saw it in an ad or something, and I'm like, I gotta see this movie. And that was my first introduction to Mexican horror movies, and I loved it. I didn't get a chance to follow up on it and get more because of circumstances and all that. But in preparation for this, I mean, Tubi. First of all, I'm going to say Tubi has tons of Mexican wrestling movies, luchador, lucha libre films, whatever you want to call them, with amazing dubs. These whoever did the dubbing, it should get an award.
They're the VCI releases. I think they have all the VCI Blu-rays on there.
Okay, that makes sense. But then I watched Cemetery of Terror, which I loved. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I watched that and I messaged you. I'm like, I want more of this.
It's crazy that, like, the movies that you could get in a Mexican grocery store for $5 a couple of years ago, Vinegar Syndrome's putting out for $40 now. Right. So yeah.
I mean, I watched Cemetery of Terror. I watched Grave Robbers, which I thought was almost equal. It was a little bit lower than that movie. I did watch Night of the Bloody Apes, which is weird because I always thought that was a Paul Naschy film, and it wasn't. So I don't know where my own disconnection came from. And that was all right. And then I watched Cyclone the other day, and Cyclone to me was very entertaining. I mean, it had Lionel Stander in it, for God's sake.
Yeah.
But the dialogue was terrible. But the movie itself was compelling. I was like, I wanted to know what happened to these poor people that are all stranded from this cyclone, So,
you're in the world of the Cardona family at this point with that movie. Yeah. And
so I wanted to bring him up and have you guys talk about some of these guys that were in the background of these movies.
Yeah, I love Night of the Bloody Apes a lot because it seems like he just kept making, once he got into his medical horror phase of, like, we have female luchadors and we have real heart transplants put into movies and there's brain transplants and this happening. It just seemed to be like a genre he really loved. And also his Santa Claus movie is one of the greatest movies ever. It is like an astounding, just one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen. I love all of theirs. And his son made Bermuda Triangle, which is great. Guyana Call to the Damned, Beaks. And they're also the cousin of the Zacharias family who made the Bees and Demonoid. So there's like a whole, like, interconnected Cardona family. And Rene Cardona III made Vacations of Terror 1, which is awesome. Both Vacations of Terror movie are both really great. So yeah, that whole family's made some really great movies. Zindi the Swamp Boy is pretty good too. It's very strange and it's a super downer, but it's something else.
Night of the Bloody Apes is one of my favorites too. And the strange thing about that movie, and Juan mentioned earlier about how the early Mexican horror films were influenced by Universal monster movies, that they were really that's what attracts me to it as a genre, is because it's using these tropes that were in the Universal films, but you're seeing it through the lens of a different culture. And that's really exciting because there's a quality to them that is unlike the Universal films too. It's like Universal films from another dimension. And the sets, especially, I'm really into the sets. Like at Night of the Bloody Apes was a little bit beyond that era of the cobwebs and the fog and everything, but it also had this very strange, unreal look to it. I'm just wondering if it was filmed at Churubusco Studios in Mexico City, because
Yeah, yes, it was. That's one of the films. Rene Cardona was in that film, but Rene Cardona, basically, that movie is actually the sequel or the remake of the original Night of the Bloody Apes movie, which is called The Doctor of Doom. And I have, I'm gonna show you another visual here. This is something, if you guys don't have this, you need to have it in your collection, okay? This right here happens to be the K. Gordon Murray collection done by none other than Something Weird Video.
Oh,
Now,
yeah,
this is probably already out of print. I don't know if you can get a copy of it or not, but this right here had the original Night of the Bloody Apes movie, was this one right here, The Doctor of Doom, okay? And there's the scientist right there. And it involved the luchador, female wrestlers. Of course, in Night of the Bloody Apes, we got Batwomen, or you know, Batwoman, the one that looks like Batwomen, in as the female wrestler in that film, except with the gore. You know, they had some nudity and they had the gore. This one didn't have the nudity and the gore, but it did have all the elements of the usual thing about the brain, taking the brains out and implanting brains into other luchadors. But this right here is the first film that trended off the Night of the Bloody Apes, The Doctor of Doom. Okay, and then the other films on here. Actually, this DVD has the Mexican, the Aztec mummy films. It has a complete array of trailers with a filmography of all the Mexican Aztec movies. Of course, wrestling women involved with Lorena Velasquez. These are all the Aztec movies that were done back in the early 60s. So yeah, this is a must-have if you don't have it, because it has so much stuff in here that for anybody that's new to the genre, wants to learn more about, it has all the trailers on here of El Vampiro and all the other, the Creature of the Walking Dead, Face of the Screaming Werewolf. It's even got Little Red Riding Hood and the Monsters in here, believe it or not, guys. Okay, but yeah, this is a must-have in the collection. You mentioned, Sam, a little earlier, we were talking about, and Roger, you had an interest, basically, the movie that kind of feared and scared a lot of us in the early 60s, basically, was this movie right here.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even
Now,
the
I got to tell you, the Brainiac is the movie. Abel Salazar was the Brainiac. He was the main guy in here, you know. And I tell you, you know, and again, this movie involves time travel elements, because a lot of these movies has the time travel element where it starts off in the 1600s and then it jumps 300 years ahead into the 1960s. And the Brainiac is just one of those movies where, you know, you never thought you'd see a creature that would have a tongue that would suck out and stick it in the back of your neck and suck your blood out of your neck. But Abel Salazar, this was the movie that really, really put him over the top. And of course, I got to say one thing. The director of this film, Chano Urieta, he was like the grandfather of Mexican horror. I mean, a lot of Mexican horror films in Mexico throughout the 1940s, 50s, 60s, into the 70s. And Chano Urieta directed this film. And this movie is the one that a lot of people recognize Mexican horror. When you mention, oh, Mexican horror, right away they go to this film,
right
to the Brainiac.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that I had to mention that. And if you don't mind, Roger, guys, I want to just go real quickly over some of the other visuals of these great horror films from the late 50s to the early 60s that the company Casa Negra put out. They put out a total of 7 films. Believe it or not, they went out of business and went bankrupt, and it was too early in the stage, not even 2 years after they had released all these great films. But the next batch of films that were going to be released before they went under was this movie right here, El Mundo de los Vampiros, which is the world of the vampires, okay, with Guillermo Murai. This was the next follow-up that they were going to do for Casa Negra. And then the film that was going to be on there as a double feature was The Living Head, which was another Mexican horror film. It's about the head on a table. And of course, about these scientists, they go to the Aztec tomb and cover the head of Popopo or whatever, and the Aztec mummy, and Herman Robles is in that. But this one and The Living Head were the two films that Casa Negra were going to put out before they went down and under bankrupt. Here are the films that they released, and I got to tell you, they were wonderful films. The first one, after El Vampiro, came this one here, The Black Pit of Dr. M.
I need that one so bad.
This is, you can visit my website. I have it on my website. This is a film that I highly recommend because, again, Fernando Mendes did this film like he did El Vampiro. He was a great director. But in this film, there was an actor. He's a Spanish actor by the name of Gaston Santos. And he was the primary lead role in this film. And this film is a great horror film, Mexican horror film, with the original Spanish version, the English version, the translated version. All the versions are on this here, and it's got a ton of extra special features and everything. So this was like the following one after El Vampiro came out. Then after that, you had this one, this little gem right here, The Man and the Monster. Okay. Now, The Man and the Monster, this one came out in 1958, believe it or not, a year after El Vampiro. And again, this is a movie, this one was done by Rafael Valedon, but Abel Salazar is in this film also. And this is a typical movie, it's a horror film, a Mexican horror film about a pianist who plays the piano, and then in the turn of turning the piano, he becomes a werewolf. It's really a strange film, but it's a great, I recommend, horror film, okay? Then follow in that series from Casa Negra came one of the favorites, The Witch's Mirror. Now, The Witch's Mirror right here, this one right here was from this one's from 1960, was one of the early ones from 60. And I would say, again, Chano Urieta directed this film. This is a great horror film. It had all the gothic elements of a universal horror film from the early 30s and the 40s, and a lot of horror. And Rosita Arenas is in this film. That's her right there, Rosita Arenas. And this is another great film, The Witch's Mirror, which was also dubbed by K. Gordon Murray. This version here is the original Spanish and English versions, not the K. Gordon Murray versions on these. The next one was the follow-up to that one, was called The Curse of the Crying Woman. Okay, now The Curse of the Crying Woman, this one came out in 1961, the year after The Witch's Mirror. And there it is right there. And another gothic horror, supernatural, really scary film. And this one was done by Rafael Valedon, but it had Rosita Arenas again. And of course, Abel Salazar. He was instrumental in being in all these films because he had created the APSA company with his brother, Alfredo Salazar. So this was the last film, the series that Casa Negra put out of Mexican horror films. And this was around 2010, 2009. And then they went under. I was waiting for the next releases to come out because there's such beautiful prints. You can't, you can't find better prints than these on movies.
Yeah, and AIP released that movie syndicated that movie in the US as Curse of the Crying Woman. So
the Curse of the Crying, yeah.
That got seen on TV, yeah.
Yeah, the K. Gordon Murray special.
So, I'm just going to say this right now. I'm very disappointed because you guys are going to bankrupt me with all these movies that I now have to go out and purchase, okay? I'm just telling you.
No, you don't have to, Roger. You really don't. But I'm just saying, I want to share my love and my expertise of all these films because I tell you, The Monster Bash is a great show, and that's a show where a lot of people go. I'll go there, and they just go there to pick up on all these great Mexican horror films, and they watch the Mexican Horror Night. And there's a lot of fans, believe it or not, in the United States of all of this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Not just the Mexican horror, but the lucha libre films, all of the, you know, the luchador films and everything. There's a big trend. And now El Hijo del Santo, the son of Santo, which is he's very much alive. He's very much active in Mexico in the wrestling circuit. And he's got his son. The son of Santo has his son, Santo Jr. And then, of course, it's a tradition that stays in the family. But Blue Demon also has Blue Demon Jr.,
Oh,
which,
wow.
by the way, I had the opportunity, Roger, to interview Blue Demon Jr. live. That picture that you see, my picture there with me and Blue Demon,
Yes.
that was from, that was an interview that I did in 2017. I had a 1 hour interview on stage with him where we talked about his life and his father and, you know, his life story and how it went and everything, the films. And it was amazing. You can see a short version of that on YouTube. My interview with Blue Demon Jr. from Monster Bash 2017. This is like a 15-minute version of it, but it was actually a full 1 hour interview that I did on stage with him. And he's an incredible guy, let me tell you. And guess what? Not too many people know his identity, but I was one of the ones that got to pick him up at the airport. And of course, he didn't have a mask on when he came through. So, you know, I got the honors of seeing who Blue Demon Jr. was, and of course, keep it secret. But he's amazing. And he had so many great stories to tell. Chano Urieta, Sam, is Blue Demon Jr.'s grandfather.
Yeah. I figure because he directed a lot of the Blue Demon movies.
Exactly. The very first Blue Demon movie that came out in 1964 called Blue Demon was directed by Chano Urieta.
Yeah.
And that was their grandfather. You know, they lived in a family of wrestling, you know, because they kept it in the family for many, 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 many years. Of course, I got to thank also the Agra Sanchez family, because the Agra Sanchez family in Mexico, they were instrumental too in putting together a lot of these horror films from the 60s. Not to mention, of course, the dynasty of Santo with Jose Guadalupe Cruz, Jose G. Cruz, that did the novels and the comic books from the 1950s, which is a whole different thing altogether about Santo.
Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, you know, it's amazing that they continued on, because these films to this day, there's still a lot of great Mexican horror films out there. In the 70s, there was a whole trend of Mexican horror films that came out that were really good. And then into the 80s, they got a little bit more gorier. As the years went on, they got more gorier and gorier. They got away from the classic trend of what the original classic films were, with the scare and not a lot of blood, but you get to see creatures and different grotesque faces and all of that, you know?
I would say Bill mentioned that a lot
That's
of.
amazing.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What are you saying, Bill?
Good.
That was Sam.
Oh, I was going to say, Bill mentioned that so many movies were close to the Universal and taking the Universal monsters. The ones that I really enjoy are, I'll probably screw up this name. Obviously, I can't speak English half the time. But Carlos Enrique Taboada, who did Even the Wind.
Yes.
Yeah, he did Even the Wind is Afraid, which is one of my favorite movies.
Yes.
Which, if you see it, is literally like a 15-year before Suspiria. And it's very similar. Blacker Than the Night, Poison for the Fairies, which he did in the 80s, and The Book of Stone. All of his movies are very gothic and very step away from the Universal style. Still very classic and gothic horror, but are so imaginative and almost feel like movies that are so uniquely Mexican movies that don't feel like they could be made anywhere else in the world. And he's one of my favorites.
Yes.
And he wrote the Nostradamus movies before he became a director.
Mm-hmm.
So he's one of my favorites, and I really like El Escapulario, which is a very Catholic movie, but it's about a medallion that can protect people from death, and no one believes it. And it's nearly an anthology film almost of the stories that happen to the people that hold it. And I really dig that too. So as the 60s go on, they start to get a little stranger. And like you said, by the 70s, there's a lot of experimentation, like Alucarda, obviously, Dr. Tar's Horror Dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
There's Jodorowsky coming into Mexico and making El Topo and Holy Mountain, which are incredibly experimental. There's The Dried Butterflies, which is great. And obviously, Bill knows I love Tintoera Killer Shark, which is a wild movie. So there's a really neat, and another one I really like is Muñeca Reina, which is about a man that comes back home and remembers a girl he went to grade school with, and her parents have kept a doll of her in her room for 40 years. And the more he becomes obsessed with this doll, the more he realizes how meaningless his life is. It's a really strange movie that I don't even know if it's a horror movie. It's kind of like, but there are movies that feel like unlike movies that come from anywhere else in the world. So those are a couple of my favorites. If VCI's put out a lot of these, they have a sale going on right now, Roger. I don't work from them. I'm not selling, but if you want to save some money, like the Santo set's only like $25, which is ridiculous because those Santo Blu-rays look amazing. Like they look so nice. By comparison, I think we're all kind of used to we're used to these beaten up versions of the Santa movies, and when you see one of these cleaned up ones, it's like a revelation. You're like, what? Oh, that's the color his mask should be.
Right.
I thought it was a little pink and a little bit of orange in it. I didn't realize it. That's why he's the man with the silver mask. Okay, I get it.
Right.
I just want to add on to what you said there, Sam.
Mhm.
As far as you mentioned a couple of movies there, the horror movies that were not, there is actually, I want to show you this visual here. You probably have this one, but you mentioned it. Here it is right here. This right here is Mexican Horror Classics double feature. Now this one has The Body Snatchers, Ladrón de Cadáveres with Wolf Binsky right there. You can see it. And it's got the Escapulario, the one that you mentioned right here, which is a story, like you said, right there, that movie right there. And I'm glad it released it on Blu-ray because this never was available on DVD. It's one of the ones that I wanted to add in the collection. It is a great film. I have to mention, along with this film, there's another film that I have to make great mention, and it's called Macario. Now, Macario is a movie, it's about the Day of the Dead in Mexico, and it was a movie that very similar to the Escapulario here, where it involves this peasant farmer who wanted to get have a turkey for his family, and he couldn't get the turkey, so he actually went out there, and what happened was, and his search to get the turkey to bring home for dinner, he got to meet the devil, he got to meet God, and he got to make decisions that told him, well, you know what? If you do this, I can give you, riches. If you do this. And what happened was he took the deal of the devil that gave him 3 witches, and the witches were that he can perform and he can heal people that were going to die, but only good people he can heal. If there were people that were evil and they were bad and he couldn't see them, the spirits, then they were going to have a horrible death. And that was his visions. It's a great movie. It's not really horror. It's more like a fantasy film.
Yeah.
But if you can get a hold of it, I definitely recommend Macario, which falls in line with Escapulario.
It reminds me of Simon of the Desert a lot too, which they're movies that maybe you're kind of sort of in horror. They have some fantasy elements, but they're also almost more parables too, which is really interesting, where American movies didn't really do a lot of that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you guys think of Rob Zombie's The Haunted World of El Super Bisto?
Well, I tell you, I that one there, Rob Zombie has his movies were a lot of great movies, but I mean, a lot of times it's like when they're trying to call, like the Night of the Bloody Apes that you mentioned, you try to mix the horror, the gore into the horror, and then use the colors and make it, create a creature, have, an element with a monster in it like that, It's sort of like the Paul Nachi movies. I'm a huge Paul Nachi fan, and I like the Spanish movies of Paul Nachi. I follow a lot. So, I mean, but yeah, I'm not huge into the later movies of the late 80s and the 90s because I'm kind of stuck in the past, guys, with all the classic Mexican horror stuff.
I do get more into the 80s stuff, like Grave Robbers and both Occasion of Terror movies. I think Don't Panic's really fun. It's kind of like Dimensiones Occultes. It's pretty great. I like Violador Infernal. The VHS era is just nuts because it's just like kind of whatever you want to happen can happen, and there's a lot of obviously ripping off of stuff of American slashers. And I even like Demonoid a lot, but then it's interesting because like stuff kind of dies off in the mid 90s and doesn't really come back till like Kronos is really the next time when you start to look into Mexican horror, and Perdita Durango are the next level of the 90s that get kind of really interesting. And I've really started trying to get into modern stuff too. There's a movie called The Similars, which is really great. Have you seen that one?
Which one is that?
The Similars.
The Similars? No, I
Yeah,
haven't
it's
seen that.
from 2014, I think, but it's very much a Twilight Zone episode where it's a bus pulls up at a bus station, and gradually over the next hour and a half, every person in there turns into the same person. They all look alike, start to speak alike. They all grow mustaches, and everybody becomes the same face. Even when they go,
Interesting.
through magazines, everybody in the magazine suddenly looks like the same person too. It's
Wow.
really, really strange, and it takes place during like a really violent time in Mexico City, so everybody's worried about people finding out their secrets and what side of the law are they on, and eventually everybody becomes the same person. It's on Shudder right now.
Oh,
It's really wild. It's something else. And Here Comes the Devil is really good, that came out a couple years ago. And We Are What We Are is pretty good too. They're obviously, maybe like you said, a little too violent
no,
stuff.
I got to tell you, Shudder, I have Shudder, and they do have a lot of great programming. I watch a lot of the films on Shudder, and they're very, very good because they cover pretty much, all they even cover Italian giallo, and I like
Oh yeah.
Italian. I love giallo horror, so they cover that, and they have a lot of the great films, from Lucio Fulci and the Dario Argento and Bava and all these great giallo Italian horror directors. But they also got some of the classic ones too, Horror Express, but that, some of those other ones that you mentioned are all there, So I've been watching the Curse films, that whole trilogy on the Curse films, and now they do a lot of great documentary styles, and so yeah, I like the Shudder. I'm gonna have to check into that Similars. If it's on Shudder, I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, it's in black and white too, so it's pretty wild.
Cool.
I saw it about a year ago, and it kind of blew my mind, and I was like, wow, I can't believe Shudder picked it up. So I'm always kind of like on the hunt for, especially the hard part too is to find a lot of the 90s Mexican stuff is really hard. That's why I'm glad Vinegar Syndrome picked up so much of it, because it took me a long time to find like Muerte Infernal, and especially like there's this strange crossover of like slashers and also like drug cartel movies where the covers look like they're going to be drug cartel movies and they're slashers, and vice versa. So it gets really wild, like around like 92 to 2000.
Yeah.
I'm like, what genre am I going to get? I mean, I'll buy it. Like I've bought so many like 8-packs and 10-packs of movies hoping that one or two will be horror, not knowing. And there's nothing written about them. There's nothing on IMDb about them. A lot of times that's what's amazing about these movies is like, even with the internet today, how many genres are there where you're literally a babe in the woods, where you can't find out any information outside of who was in it and who the director was, and that's it. You're the one experiencing it and maybe writing about it online for the first time, which is super exciting.
Yeah. So you guys have brought up a question to my mind, is that, I've watched a lot of Italian horror. In fact, I think I was watching Cyclone, and the music in that and some of the cues sort of made me think that there was a giallo influence there to some degree. But and I've watched a lot of Spanish horror films, like one you brought up, the Paul Naschy films, and then there's the Jess Franco films and the Blind Dead and all this stuff, and I've watched a lot of those, and I hadn't until this past year really watched a lot of Mexican horror movies. So, what, if any, is there a difference between horror movies from Spain and horror movies from Mexico? Can you guys answer that?
I would say, well, definitely. I was saying for Italian, there's a definite difference, but there's a lot of Mexican giallo movies that you could consider giallo, like Night of a Thousand Cats flirts with giallo very much. Mary, Mary, Bloody Mary it's also a weird vampire movie. It's something else. It's on Shudder. It just came up on there too, and it's kind of like a weird Messiah of Evil crossover. I would say as for Spanish movies are strange because up until the mid 60s, or the early 70s, General Franco was still alive, so they couldn't go full tilt kind of as hard as they wanted, and then after that it kind of happens. It feels like a lot of, at least to me, a lot of Spanish movies are very based on either kind of satanic elements or like kind of Blind Dead kind of things, or they actually get into a lot of their own genres, like The Corruption of Chris Miller. Those movies kind of feel like that, versus Mexico feels, so the language is the same, but Mexico just is its own thing when it comes to horror for me. I don't really know how to describe it. It's like an alien nature to it that I don't get from the Spanish films.
Well, I want to add on to that there, Sam. But I mean, I got to tell you, Spain's films, you know, they're Mexico has established what they call the golden age of cinema. And I got to tell you one thing, Roger, and I want to bring this out to you and mention that the Mexican horror films didn't really have its starts in the 50s. It didn't really have its starts in the 50s or the 60s. It had its starts in the early 30s, believe it or not. And I want to mention two films, if I may, because these are two instrumental films that if you don't have them in your, if you have never seen them, you should try to go out and watch these films, because this is basically the introduction of what they call Mexican horror, the cinema in the early 30s. I'm talking about during the pre-code days. Now, in pre-code days, I'm talking about 33, which was still the pre-code. This is the Hayes pre-code era. And there was a film that came out in 1933 that defined the beginnings of what the early Mexican horror is and the true horror of Mexican cinema, with this film right here.
La Llorona. Yeah, I was going to
La
say.
Llorona.
I did actually mention that one at the beginning, that they had started making horror films, but they didn't really hit the mainstream till the 50s, is what I.
Right. But this film right here, okay, I want to say, this film started off the craze to later on. The director that did this film went on to do two other horror films. His name is Fernando de Fuentes. And this was the first version of La Llorona from 1933. And highly recommend this film. I mean, because it really, it's not only a great story, but it tells the legend of the folklore of what is La Llorona and how that legend came to be, because that followed it not only from 33, but it went on to into the 50s, into the 60s, the 70s, and even today we have a lot of films relating to the story and the folklore of La Llorona. Okay, the second film that came out in 1934 that Fernando de Fuentes did is this movie right here. It's called The Phantom of the Monastery. Now, The Phantom of the Monastery, or The Phantom of the Convent, was a horror film based around this monastery of monks. And it has a very gothic horror story about these monks that supposedly have been died a couple hundred years ago, but they were alive because these people landed up going into this monastery, this convent, and actually saw them. But Fernando de Fuentes, this movie right here, is the one, along with La Llorona, that started off the craze. And the following year, he did another movie called Two Monks, which was another movie related to monastery and monks and that kind of a gothic horror scene. So these three films were the ones that, to me, started the craze on, because in 1937, another film came out about La Llorona called La Herencia de La Llorona, which was the inheritance of La Llorona. And in 1960, there was another horror film, La Llorona, that came out in Mexico, which was an updated version. And then, of course, one of the Casa Negra films also has a related story to La Llorona, which was let me pull it out over here.
Well, Santo even fought La Llorona.
Yeah. One of the movies that actually with Mantequilla Nápoles, which was Santo versus La Llorona, that was that was kind of like a little wild one there. But but the story that kept on going with La Llorona and everything, and it went on to even evolve Gaston Santos in doing Western horrors, and La Llorona was even in a Western horror film. This is the movie that La Llorona appeared. The story was based off of this movie right here.
Oh,
wow.
Rene Cardona,
the Living Coffin, okay?
Yeah.
Now, this is a Western, okay? And I got to tell you, Mexico was very influential in doing not just Mexican classic horrors, but they went into different genres. This is one of the big genres that came out in the 1950s, in the mid 50s, late 50s, 60s. There was many Western horror films. Now I'm talking about Western horror films, cowboys versus monsters, okay? But this movie is one of the ones that kicked off the trend with Gaston Santos. Then after that, I want to just mention I'm gonna take you forward a little bit here. Here is El Pantano de las Ánimas, also known as the Swamp of the Lost Monster.
Huh.
This is the Mexican version of the Creature from the Black Lagoon, guys.
Oh.
All right. With Gaston Santos also in here as a cowboy, and it involves this creature-looking guy. He wannabe Creature from the Black Lagoon right there, and it's a great western with that monster in it. Okay, it's called El Pantano de las Ánimas, or the Swamp of the Lost Monster. K. Gordon Murray did dub this one. This is one of the ones that K. Gordon Murray dubbed, and that was the name of it, The Swamp of the Lost Monster. Just to mention on, there was another one, and this one here is one of my favorites because if you've never seen this movie, you gotta watch it because you get a lot. I mean, it's amazing. This has a trio of different horror creatures in here. The Riders of the Skulls, El Charro de las Calaveras, is actually him right there. He's a Zorro type character, and actually he does fight in here. These are all the monsters he fights. He fights a werewolf. He fights a vampire, Dracula type character. He fights a witch. He fights zombies out of the grave that come out from the grave, the ghouls, and he fights the headless horseman, right there. And then there's the head in the box. I mean, this movie has everything, and it came out in 1965. And I want to tell you, Alfredo Salazar, which was Abel Salazar's brother, he's in the film. He's one of the campesinos, one of the farmers that gets attacked by the vampire, and he sucks his blood and kills him. Okay, Alfredo Salazar. So this movie is another Western horror film, keeping it in that Western horror. A trilogy of 3 films that I want to just quickly cover, and then I'm done with the Mexican Western horrors.
We're gonna have to do a whole show on Western horror movies because I had no idea there were so many.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I'm just going to cover these, and I'm done right here. Okay, in 56, right here, in 1956, okay, the movie The Headless Rider, which is this one right here, El Jinete Sin Cabeza, is called The Headless Rider.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a head. He's actually a galloping character. He's a hero, and he goes around without a head, and he fights all kinds of demons and monsters and stuff. It's a Western, okay? And it was a trilogy of 3 films. This is the first one. The second one was called The Mark of Satan, right there, La Marca de Satanás, and it's involving vampires and stuff. And it's a Western right there. You can see the Charro and stuff like that. And then the final one was The Head of Pancho Villa, which is actually the story of how Pancho Villa's head got in a box, and then they had to recover the box with the head it was an evil spirit that was taken over, and it's another Western horror with also the Headless Rider. Now, I want to say, all 3 films that had the ghostly crime-fighting character of El Jinete Sin Cabeza, the Headless Rider, they were all done by Ramona Bone and directed by none other than Chano Urieta. So there he is again doing Western horrors. And this is just a few of the many, many, many that were there throughout the 50s and the 60s, a lot of them with horror elements. So you see, it wasn't just the luchador films, it wasn't just the regular witches and vampires and ghouls and werewolves, it was also Western horrors.
Right.
So even Santo gets in on it. He's in the Santo and the Riders of Terror.
Yes,
and it's like around the late 60s. So he's in a supernatural Western as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's it. Yeah, he was. Uh-huh.
It's really amazing, and that's why I wanted you guys on the show. And I'm so glad you guys came because it's a whole, for me, it's this whole other genre that I only knew a little bit about. And to just sort of start even to just delve into what they've got and what the movies are and the actors and the people behind it. It's unbelievable, just when you think you've seen every movie in existence, all of a sudden there's like 5,000 more that you haven't seen,
Oh yeah. I always worry that I'm going to run out of movies, and I have learned that this will probably never happen.
Right.
Um, even just I keep huge letterbox lists of my goals this year to finish the. I'm pretty close. I'm like about 5 movies away from all the Santo movies, and I just get excited about genres and or countries or concepts and just dive into them. Another two that I would bring up of the Santo movies I would definitely check out are El Mundo de los Muertos, which is literally Santo in Black Sunday. It is like a time traveling. You get to see what Santo was like in the 1600s. Um, and a lot of the Santo movies really set up the fact that he's not the first Santo. He's kind of like the Phantom, where it's like, the mask has been passed down for hundreds of years, like multiple generations. And then Santo versus the She-Wolves is one of my favorites too, because it suddenly gets almost like a giallo kind of look, and it's very gothic horror mixed in with a Santo movie. And what I love
again, I didn't quite hear it.
which one, Santo versus the She-Wolves, is really good too. And I think what's amazing about these movies are no matter where these movies go, they always start and end with a match in Arena, Mexico. So you're bookended in the real world of Santo having a match and winning his match, and then all of a sudden we go off on some crazy place. Like there's an axe throwing ghost that has been chasing Santo for years, or a ghostly strangulator that's been chasing him. And Santo faces all these different creatures, and then we're back in the safe world of Arena, Mexico. He wrestles, he gets the camel clutch on someone, and that's it. And everybody's safe again. And I think that's the beauty of these movies. Like they don't have a formula, yet they also have a formula. So they're
Right,
fun.
right. I was trying to, like I said, I was trying to tell someone about these movies, and they're just so great. And actually, when I first was talking to you guys about coming together and doing this particular episode, it was probably like 2 or 3 months ago. And all of a sudden I had contracted COVID, even though for 2 years people with COVID would cough all over me and I never got it. Out of the blue, I got it. So, anyways, I was in the bedroom for a week, anyways, and I would like sleep for 2 hours, then watch a movie, then sleep for 2 hours and watch a movie. And what I was watching was these Mexican horror films on Tubi, and I have to say, like Cemetery of Terror, that blew me away. I mean, I get. All right, I'm 52 years old and I still get scared of movies, even once. And I had the blanket up like this through the whole movie. I was hiding through that and covers. I was terrified. It was so good,
I love that movie that it's almost like 2 movies. Like once the original cast gets killed, suddenly these kids come out and they're like, oh, and now it's like a Scooby-Doo movie.
Right.
It's wild. There's the other, I watched one on Tubi today, Santo and the Vengeance of the Mummies on there. And again, it's the great looking VCI quality thing. And the really interesting thing is the first match in it, every single person in that match, Santo eventually took their mask. Gory Casanova, he lost his hair twice to Santo. Dick Angelo lost his mask to Santo. And El Rebelde, eventually his tag partner in that match, lost his mask to him. And why I'm obsessed with El Rebelde, after he lost his mask, he became Charles Bronson Mexicano because he looked exactly like Charles Bronson. So he wrestled with a Charles Bronson gimmick up until about 85 or 86. And he looks 100% like Charles Bronson. And he would just do Charles Bronson mannerisms, like he do the little gun and stuff in his matches, which is pretty rad.
Until Charles Bronson showed up and said, hey, cut it out.
I would love. No, I guess he didn't know. He stayed in Vermont on his farm when he wasn't making movies. I'm obsessed with Bronson because Bronson was like very much at that time in his career. He had a rule where he would work 8 hours a day. And if it went over 8 hours, he'd be like, sorry, it's 8 hours. I'm leaving. And like he took his whole family everywhere he shot. His wife was in almost all of his movies. And he had the best deal ever. His Canon deal is the greatest deal. He got $5 million a movie. And otherwise, he wouldn't have made, for his age, he would have had to go to Italy or he would have had to go to Spain or other countries to make stuff. So he had a really sweetheart deal. But I love Charles Bronson.
Which he had done in the early 70s, like Violent
Oh, yeah.
stuff.
Violent City, yeah. And, he made a ton of, he made his name in a Sergio Leone movie,
Yeah. Once Upon a Time in the West, great movie.
Yeah, he's amazing in that movie. I love Bronson and especially Canon stuff. I wish they had brought some more Mexican stuff over. They did bring a lot of Italian stuff over. They brought Hercules and a few other Italian movies over. So it was pretty awesome with them to do.
So, we're getting close to 2 hours here, so I just want to kind of wrap things up. And obviously, I'd love to have you guys back on, talk more about Mexican movies as well as the what we talked about, the horror westerns. That's like intrigued me now because I didn't realize. I figured it was just Billy the Kid versus vampire and
No, no, no.
the other one, the Frankenstein's daughter. But no, let's talk about this more on another episode. But if someone listening to the show or watching the show wanted to get into Mexican horror, whether it be just horror movies or the luchador films, I know there's Tubi, but Juan, you've also got tons of them that you sell on DVD. Is there a list where people can maybe get started? Like, how do people know where to go? Okay, I've heard the show. I like Mexican horror. Where do I begin?
They can go to my website.
There you go.
Can I give you my website?
Absolutely, go right
I
ahead.
mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to do that,
You're
over the
absolutely
show over there. Well, if you wanna check out my entire filmography of the Mexican luchador and horror films, my website is www.fifthdimensionfilms.net. Okay, and there,
a 5th fifth.
yeah, 5th dimensionfilms.net. So when the page opens up, you're gonna see, and then you can click on the categories. And I have a huge category on Mexican horror, and my category on the luchador, Santo Bludi, is also there. There's 100+ films in each categories. Okay, and I also have the classic sci-fi horror, and I've got some Japanese and Asian horror, which I happen to like. I'm an avid fan of the 1950s Japanese horror films, and no, I don't want to get into that, but I mean, they're on the website. But I have a detailed description of every movie there. If you want to just look at the description and read a little synopsis about each movie that I have on there, some of the ones that I've covered here, you can also go there and browse and just look. You don't have to buy anything. You can subscribe to my website. Okay, on the bottom, just subscribe and become a subscriber, because I do have sales where I give discounts when you buy the films and everything. And if there's any particular movies that you want to add to your collection that you don't see on the website, you can email me, through the website, and send me an email and let me know, hey, Juan, do you have this movie? I said, yeah, no problem. I'm more than happy to. But my filmography, I've been collecting now. I got to tell you guys, this all started for me when I was a kid in New York growing up. My parents used to take me to the theaters and we would watch Mexican horror films. Santo films were my first introduction back in the early 60s, okay, as a kid. And when, we would spend Saturdays in the movie houses in New York watching double features of El Santo and Mascarado de Plata with cartoons. And my parents, loved to watch the luchador films because they were fun. There was action, there was the wrestling, you had the monsters, and it was just a fun thing with no extreme violence, no blood, no gore. As these movies were, to me, family-oriented type films. So I was able to acquire that, and then throughout the rest of my life, of course, I went to the military, retired from the military, and I visited Mexico many, many times, to where I wanted to follow the trend and I wanted to find out more about this. So that's why I was able to go down. I went to Guadalajara, I went to Mexico City. I've been to Arena, Mexico, and I went to, of course, Santos' birthplace. I went to Blue Demon's birth. I mean, it's just a whole thing that I really enjoyed and I love doing, because it's a trend that a lot of people would really like to get into, and it's a whole different genre in itself. That's amazing. That's fun. These movies are great. They're fun to watch. I believe, like any American horror movie, like modern movies or older movies, sci-fi movies, all the movies we watched through the 50s and 60s and 70s as kids growing up. I mean, we have a liking and a love for a lot of them. I happen to have a love for the Mexican horror films and the luchador, because this is what I basically grew around up as. And especially at Santo, because I got the opportunity to meet both Blue Demon Jr. I did the interview, and I got to meet the son of Santo too, El Hijo del Santo. I met him also, and met his son, Santo Jr. So these are all great people. They're still very active in the circuit. They're still involved in the wrestling circuit, And if you go, of course, you go YouTube, you can find everything relating to Santo, the hijo, the son of Santo, and all the other luchadors. But I mean, my favorites, of course, I have to say, for the beginning of El Santo, then we were talking about mostly him throughout the show, was his first, I would say the first 10 films that he did, and then skip over to the later films that he did in the 70s, which Sam mentioned, the Santo and Blue Demon in the World of the Dead, because Blue Demon was with him in that film, and El Mundo de los Muertos. And that's really a good film. But not only that, then after that, there was quite a few other ones, like the sequel to Santo versus Las Mujeres Vampiros, Santo versus the Vampire Women, had a sequel in 1970, which was The Revenge of the Vampire Women. So it's another Santo film that came out shortly after Las Momias de Guanajuato. I have to bring that one in, this one here. You don't have it, you have to watch that one. That's El Santo, Blue Demon, and that's right there. If you can see right there, Mil Máscaras.
Oh, okay.
With a different mascot. Right there are the three in The Mummies of Guanajuato. This movie right here is from 1970, and believe it or not, it's the one where there was a little bit of actual frenzy between these two guys, because Santo kind of got the hero credit for this film, not Blue Demon, at the end of the film. Sam, if you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. So, I mean, it is a great film, and there they are, the three of them together, which many other films, Blue Demon and Santo partnered and became partners, because there was this thing, an animosity that grew among them in the 50s because of the wrestling, which to this day, believe it or not, the son of Santo and Blue Demon Jr. still carry that animosity to some extent. I don't know why. They should just put it past them, but it's their fathers, it's the heritage, it's the legend, it's who was better than who. He was better than ours. I was better than him, that kind of thing. But still,
there's still animosity between AAA and El Hijo de Santo that they use Blue Demon Jr. and they don't use Santa. It's there's still huge politics between them. Yeah.
Yes.
So one thing, real briefly, I wanted to point out is that Juan, you had mentioned going to see these movies in the theater, and I know Bill and I are we're always knee deep in looking up newspaper movie ads and TV guide stuff, and Bill does it on his Groovy Doom page, right, Bill? Is that
on Facebook? Yeah.
On Facebook, yeah, and I have my excuse me, retro TV guide and movie newspaper scans page on Facebook, and lately what we've been trying to do is post newspaper ads of these films from when they were played in theaters in America, and I'm trying to think what range I looked at. I think I looked at 1965 to 75, and I could only find some in the early 70s. But if you get a chance to check it out, get on our Fright Lounge Facebook page. But there's also the Retro TV Guide page, which you'll find a link to, and it's just fun to see. I mean, for me as a kid, I wished I had seen these in the movies. I wished I was. They played. I don't think they played a lot in Boston. I mean, Juan, you said you were in New York, right?
They played very much in New York because basically, New York, the population, that had a very large Hispanic population in New York. There was a lot of Hispanics in the area that I lived. There was a huge Hispanic community, and we had the theaters there were Spanish movie houses. So they only showed movies in Spanish. So, this was basically in the Hispanic communities. But then again, I don't know if like other cities and states, Boston, Connecticut, New Jersey, they might have some of their movie houses show these films, but the American dubbed or the American versions, not the Spanish versions. The ones I saw were the full spoken Spanish versions without English, without subtitles or nothing. They were just totally in Spanish.
And a lot of the ads I found were in Spanish, and they were in Texas, so I assume they were playing Spanish-speaking audiences.
Yeah, that would be a good source to go for them in Texas, because being that, especially if you get close to the border there, you go to the border towns, you might have a good chance of getting a lot of material relating to that, and of course in Mexico too, because I know a lot of the American newspapers cross over to Mexico, and the Mexican newspapers cross over to here, and they were able to publish and do certain things to promote their movies and in their ads.
And Bill, you found somewhere playing Cemetery of Terror, I think, right? Whenever we showed it on our show, you found a couple smaller theaters in, I think, LA that maybe
Yeah,
played it,
it
right?
was in Los Angeles, and like Juan said, there probably wasn't an English dub at that time. I'm not
Yeah.
sure, because that was 1984 or 85, I believe.
Yeah.
So maybe they did prepare an English track. I'm not sure, but
Why not?
it never got an official release in the United States.
Yeah, the one on Tubi is subtitled, not dubbed. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think that Cementerio del Terror was already released on Blu-ray, has an official Blu-ray release. But I don't know if the Blu-ray has the English track version and the Spanish version, or it's the Spanish version with English subtitles. I'm not familiar with that. And they have both, like the Casa Negra films, they put both tracks on here. They had the English tracks and the Spanish versions too.
Yeah, I know. Like the Don't Panic one has both tracks. A couple of the other ones that Vinegar Syndrome have put out have dubs. The dubs, they're a little off, obviously. I think a lot of the VCI dubs are pretty wild too, especially El Hijo de Santos in the one where he fights the mummy. He plays the little kid that he adopts, and the voice that they use for him is near Italian child weird dubbing whenever his voice comes in.
Well, I picked this one up from VCI because
that one's awesome.
I picked this one up because I wanted to see what the dubbing was on this. To tell you the truth, guys, I really didn't like the dubbing.
No, it's not that good. Yeah.
To me, it's not. VCI is trying. They got the rights. Actually, they got the rights. A lot of this from the Cardona family and some of the other families involved with the films, the early films of El Santo, to do English translations or dubbings into the film. But to me, they better kept Spanish versions with the English subtitles, because a lot of fans, they want to hear Santo in his original voice, his real voice. Okay, Rodolfo Guzman Huerta had an incredible voice. If you heard him when he spoke with the mask, you could hear that deep, another baritone type voice. But when you hear him being dubbed, it just, especially, the K. Gordon Murray is a different thing. But this version, this is not a K. Gordon Murray dub. This is a VCI English dubbing track that they got. But this one has, like I said, it's got the both versions. It's got this version and the other version, the nudie version. There was a couple of nudie Santo films that were done. The Riders of Terror had a nudie version to it also that was never been found. It's considered a lost film, mostly for the international market, because these films were made. This version, this is a color version. The Treasure of Dracula is a black and white version. So there's two differences here, because this was the international version and had the nude scenes in it, where the Treasure of Dracula was the black and white version that was censored, that didn't have the nude scenes in it. So the same thing
Santo
with the
family Santo's family for years claimed that those movies didn't exist, and when that was going to play a film festival in Mexico City, they legally blocked it from being shown because they thought that it would go against his name. Because also we don't have a wrestler in the U.S. that means as much as imagine if Hulk Hogan was also John Wayne. Like that's maybe as close as you can get to what Santo means. Santo's in that one Pixar movie. He's a character in that movie. Like he means that much to the culture. Coco, yeah. He's like and he's a major hero in that movie. And like that's what's amazing to me. People that don't understand, like, oh well, why is that masked wrestler? And it's like, yeah, he means more than a masked wrestler. It's really hard to and the same as like Japan has Antonio Inoki. I think Santo even means more because Santo didn't have scandals, whereas Inoki and Hogan and other wrestlers did. Santo was very clean, and and it also presented. Being the Saint was presented as a clean wrestler too.
Exactly.
I saw that Santo with the Treasure of Dracula on Tubi, and I think it was the color version, so it must have been the nudie one, right?
And when you hear the nudie one, it's like don't expect don't expect Deep Throat. It's just a couple. Yeah. It's not. It's almost PG-13 by our standards, but by the standards of a Santo movie, it is controversial.
Well, I gotta say that there was a various times throughout his career where I gotta tell you, the Vergara family, Enrique Vergara, and the Vergara family that had a lot of these films, including, now let me see if I can pull, because I wanted to show a quick lineup of some of the movies that are the favorites. Before we leave, I want to just go off, I'll do a roll call on Santo films. But this movie right here, El Baron Bracola, this right here was the movie that was done by Agra Sanchez and by Enrique Vergara. He did a few films, and this also was slated to have a nude version, a nude scene in here with El Santo. You know, when basically this is a time travel movie too that involves Santo going back, okay, to Dracula back in the 16th century, and he's also a masked musketeer fighting with a sword. I mean, you know, this movie and the Diabolical Axe were time travel movies, along with this one. But this was also the time travel movie because he actually went back in time to do the Van Helsing Dracula type story on this one. But the time travel element on this was stolen completely off of the time tunnel TV show. If you look at the beginning of the film, the way he time travels, they have the same portal like the time tunnel. So this was ripped entirely off of the TV series Time Tunnel. So yeah, the movies with time travel elements, Baron Bracola is a great film to watch. This one here, I highly recommend it. I mean, it's a Vergara, Enrique Vergara film, but his movies were unique in a way where, you know, I mean, you got to really, you can see that the storylines, you know, they tend to be a little bit different, but it's got a good plot and a good storyline throughout the whole film from beginning to the end. There's a little wrestling and stuff in there, but, you know, it involves the story of love, Dracula being a human normal mortal before becoming a vampire and then falling in love with Rebecca and so and so and so and so. So, but, you know, that's what makes these films so much fun to watch because of the storylines involved with them.
Oh, absolutely. So, Sam, in terms of, you know, trying to get people into these movies who may not know where to begin, what's your recommendation? I know you sent me a couple of lists. I don't know if you want me to post those in the show notes.
Feel free to post those. I think the good thing to remember is, like, if there's a genre of movie, like, there's a chance that Mexico did a version of it and obviously did it in their own way. And be open to other cultures, be open to subtitles, be open to bad dubbing. You know, it's these things. If those things keep you from movies, and you're probably not ready for this. But if you love Universal horror movies, there's tons. If you like movies where space women come and try to kidnap men, there's several of those. You know, there's slashers, there's everything, you know. So there's a ton of different movies. Ship of Monsters is a great one, I think, if you're into Universal and like 50s.
Absolutely.
Stuff. Yeah, I would definitely start with that one if that's what you're into. Yeah, and if you like 80s slasher kind of stuff, there's certainly a lot of that stuff too. If you like Nightmare on Elm Street, I definitely recommend Don't Panic. It's also got Ouija board stuff in it, which I always love that.
I'll tell you a movie that you mentioned, that a movie that's really kind of cool, and it has a trilogy of stories in it. Okay. And movies with trilogy, like anthologies, I always follow like the Amicus films, and I like anthology films, okay? But Panico is a film that I recommend, Panico, and it's an anthology story, and it's got 3 or 4 different horror stories in there. That is a good movie right there, you know what I mean? And it's like, Panico, what is Panico? You know what I'm saying? So I recommend that.
Have you seen it, Sam Panico?
That's my last name. Yeah, yes, I have seen it. Yeah, I really enjoy that. And then I would recommend Even the Wind is Afraid, which is on Tubi, and you can watch that. And it's a really interesting movie. And then just be open-minded about these. See what you like, see what you don't like. Check out the list I posted, and you can always go to my site, BNS About Movies. My contact info is there. If you have a question you want to ask and you want to find out, I'm always willing to talk movies, obviously, with people. And I'm excited to share movies, and I love getting people into different cultures, movies, because I think we really need to expand our minds. And it's really great that one of the great things about the internet, of all the bad things for it, is enabled our world to become somewhat smaller and find things obviously we would have never been able to find before, which is a real benefit. And it's exciting to come together on a show like this and learn from Juan. I learned a lot tonight, and I appreciate you guys giving the forum to do this, because like I love if you watch our show or if you come to our site or if you hear me talk for 2 minutes, I'm obsessed by movies. So it's really cool to share them out with people. And watch more lucha movies, obviously.
I would like to finish up. I mean, I don't know how much more time we got, Roger, that we can give me a few more minutes. I want to do my roll call of my favorites.
Absolutely.
Of all the Santo films. 52 films. Remember, there was 52. A lot of people don't know exactly how many there were, but counting the El Cerebro del Man, the Evil Brain, and counting the Infernal Men from Cuba, the two, there was a total of 52 films. And to me, there's 20 of the top favorites, of my all-time favorites that I always follow and I love and I watch. Not only because of the filmography, but the directors involved and the people that produced and did these films. You got great directors. You got Federico Curiel. You got Alfonso Corona Blake. You got so many different directors and producers and writers that put these films together to make it a good story. Even though they're not monster movies or horror movies, they could be spy movies. They could be adventure action movies. They could be, because Santo, he went into all of that. So with that, what I want to do is I'm going to show off my roll call of my all-time favorites. And I'm going to start with the three films that came after the first two that Santo did in Cuba, which were not that great, okay? But he wasn't really well recognized, guys. But the ones that got him into the line, you mentioned, Sam, the Zombies, which was actually the fourth film after these three right here, which was the trilogy of the Federico Curiel, the director. He did three movies. And in 1961, this is what started off in the trilogy of the Federico Curiel films. It was this one, Santo versus the King of Crime. Santo versus El Rey del Crimen, the King of Crime. Now, what's the story about this? He has an origin story in here as a boy. This is this origin. Rene Cardona is his dad. And am I still on?
Yeah.
Okay. Rene Cardona is his dad in this film. There's an origin story of how, as a boy, he grows up and he gets the mask because Cardona dies, the real Santo, and then he takes it. So this is the first of the trilogy of Federico Curiel. Then you got this one here. It's called Santo in the Hotel of Death.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And that one's from 1962. All right. And the Hotel of Death is more like a crime film, but it's got a little gore in there. You can see blood and a knife, stuck in the throat. I mean, so this has a little explicit gore for the time in 62. The next one is Santo versus the Diabolical Brain. This was the third and the last film in the Federico Curiel trilogy. Now, these films were not the ones that put him on the map yet, but he was already there. He was fighting. He has a cape. He was going through everything. But the one that really did it after those three guys, the very first one is this one. Santo versus the Zombies.
Yeah.
That's the movie that put him in the spotlight with horror, relating to horror films, and he wanted to go on and do more horror films. So what followed after the Zombies was Santo versus the Vampire Women. And there's Lorena Velasquez right there. There's Santo. This is a very good horror film of the Vampire Women. And it's got a lot of great luchadors in there too, a lot of wrestling. Okay, again, this movie is another great one. We did a podcast on this. And the B-Movie Cast 140. B-Movie Cast 141 is Santo versus the Vampire Women. That one. That's one of my love. Another favorite is Santo in the Wax Museum.
Yes.
From 1963, right here. Santo contra el Museo de Cera, right here.
Yeah.
This one here, it involves, again, it's a House of Wax, House of Mystery type movie with wax figures, and of course, there's some monsters at the end. Moving right along, we got The Martians. Now, this is the first sci-fi movie that Santo did, Santo versus the Martians. Okay, and this movie right here, Wolf Rubinsky is an alien leader that comes to Earth, with his Martian women and his guys to try to take over the world. And you see Santo comes to the rescue on that one. That's another great one. Then we have the double feature of what they call the Espectro Santo movies, which is El Santo versus the Estrangulador versus the Strangler. The Phantom of the Strangler and this one was two movies that he did that involve a character like the House of Wax, Vincent Price character that was deformed, and he had a museum. Yeah, this one here, and then the sequel to this one. What's not good about these two particular films, there was a lot of musical numbers, too many musical numbers, and it had the horror elements, but then the musical numbers took it away from it and a little bit of wrestling. Okay, so that's this one, Estrangulador, and the Phantom of the Strangler, or the Ghost of the Strangler. Then Santo goes into his first color film after he did the treasure, El Vampiro and the Sexto in '68, comes Operation 67, which is one of my favorite spy films of El Santo, right here. Now, this is the movie in color where he actually not fighting monsters, but he's fighting secret. He's a secret agent with a partner. James Bond type film with a lot of spy stuff and action, and it's got some nude scenes in it too. This one, there's nudity in the beginning of the film on that one. Okay, next one is this one, Santo versus the Villains of the Ring. This is another one where he's, again, there's a lot of wrestling in this one, but he's fighting evil guys, the mafia, and takeover, and this and that, hostages, kidnapping, a scientist. The Villains of the Ring is pretty good. This one here, recommend that. Then we go into another mafia type film that he did. It's called Santo versus the Vice Mafia, La Mafia del Vicio. And you can see there he is. He's got a shirt on with a, and he's fighting this is another one of these secret agent type mafia type films that he did. Now this is all going, already into the late 60s. And then the final one that he did in the late 60s was this one, Profanadores de Tumba. This is called the not the Body Snatchers, but the Grave Robbers. This is the Vergara film that he did in 1969, and it's called The Grave Robbers. It's kind of a strange film. This one is kind of like a very, very tough to find, hard to come by film, and very rarely seen. There's never been really, really good prints of this film, but it was one that was kept in Mexico, not to be taken out of Mexico for some reason. But it is one of the better ones involving grave robbers. Okay. Then we go into the color ones in 1970. There it is, The Mummies of Guanajuato, which I showed you a little earlier. Okay, that one. Yeah. Then we have Santo versus the how do you call it? The Revenge of the Vampire Women. Now, this is the sequel to the first Vampire Women film. That's Gina Roman right there. And there it is. That's Santo versus the Revenge of the Vampire Women. All these films are in Spanish. The original Spanish languages, they're not dubbed, but they do have English subtitle tracks on.
Oh, good.
And then we got this one, Santo and Blue Demon in The Beast of Terror. There they are right there. This movie came out in 1972 or 73, and it's one of the ones that Santo and Blue Demon were collaborated in doing. This one here. It's another one of my favorites. Sam?
Quick question. Prior to all those films, was El Enmascarado de Plata, was a Santo film, right? Back in the early 50s?
1953, yeah. I do have that. I don't have it here, but maybe, for the next show, I can talk a little bit and carry about that one, El Enmascarado de Plata, and show you some visuals on that.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious about that, but continue, please. This is fascinating.
Yeah, so I'm almost done. Here's the one that Sam likes.
Yeah.
Santo versus Las Lobas. This is Santo versus the She-Wolf. Again, this film right here it came out in 72. It's a color film, and it's involved him in, battling she-wolves and stuff like that. It's got that little giallo effect and feel to it. So it's just a really good film, a color film with the she-wolves in 72. Then we got the other one that Sam liked. This is The World of the Dead. Mm-hmm. Santo in the World of the Dead. There he is right there with Blue Demon. And then Now this one here is like more like a witchcraft supernatural film, and actually have the time travel element, like Sam mentioned, where they actually land up going to purgatory or hell.
Yeah.
They actually land up down there. I don't know how they get down there, but they actually go down there and they come back. But recommend that one, In the World of the Dead. That one right there. Okay.
Nice.
Then I'm going to go over to a couple of other ones, and then I'm going to cover two more non-Santo related luchador films. Okay. This one here, Los Cazadores de Cabeza, Santo versus the Headhunters.
Ooh.
This is a movie that came, this movie is from 1971, and it's one of the color ones that Santo did, and it's actually like a jungle picture. There's no horror in here, but it's basically he's the headhunters, the cannibal headhunters, and he has a jungle gym outfit throughout the whole film. If you look at Santo, he's got a jungle gym outfit, and this has the introduction, the second introduction of his son, Jorge, is in this film. He's a young boy in here.
Oh,
So
wow.
the son of Santo is also in this film as a young boy, Jorge, in this movie, Santo versus the Headhunters. That's what it looks like. Santo versus the Headhunters. Okay. Now I want to cover a couple of other non-Santo films. I forgot this one here. I got to mention this one. This one right here is from 1974. This is one of the later ones that he did. It's called Santo versus the Black Magic. And now this movie here, he actually goes to Haiti, and he's involved in voodoo and witchcraft and his black magic. But there's Santo in his suit. Again, he got away from wearing the traditional cape and his wrestling tights in this film. But this one here is another one, La Magia Negra, the Black Magic. That was another one that he did in 72. Finally, I got two more here. I think you're going to like these. There was a series of films called the Justicieros Vengadores. Okay, that there was a lot of different wrestlers together. They wanted to get Santo involved in being part of that team, but he turned it down because he was still heavily involved with the wrestling. The first movie was The Robbery of the Mummies of Guanajuato.
Ooh.
Okay, now this film right here there's Mil Máscaras right there. You can see it has, excuse me, it has El Ángel, the angel, right there, the angel with the A, looks like Captain America or not. And it also has Jalisco Rey, El Rayo de Jalisco is right there. Okay, so there's them four in battling the mummies of Guanajuato, where they go and fight the mummies of Guanajuato. There was two movies that they did. This one, and then they landed up doing this one, The Castle of the Mummies of Guanajuato.
Wow.
As you can see, there they are again. And in this one right here, you got Tinieblas, who's another great Mexican wrestler. He was with Santo in the Fury of the Karate Fighters, the Fighting Goddess in '84. The last two films that he did was Tinieblas and Santo. And then Super San, who's another great Mexican hero type wrestler, is also in this one. Okay. And Blue Angels in here too. So you see that Mil Máscaras is not in this one, but the other wrestlers are in there, Tinieblas. And it is one of the movies that follow the trend of the Mummies of Guanajuato, because they did a lot of the Champions of Justice was another series of films that followed with all of these guys, Blue Demon, all the Mascarados and the Luchadors fighting mummies and all this stuff. This was in the latter part of the 70s, mid-70s, 74, 75, 76. And that's pretty much for that. Before into the 80s, the last round of the movies that El Santo did were really pretty bad. The last movie that he actually did prior to doing the Fury of the Fighting Goddess was a movie called, also The Fist of Death. There was another one. A Santo versus the Assassins of the Television. That's a bad number. I got to tell you guys, if you are an enthusiast of having the entire Santo film collection like I have all 52 films, by the way. You gotta have Santo versus the Assassins of Television. It's I gotta say it's bad, but it's Santo, and
Yeah.
he's old, he's heavy set, he's fat, he
Oh,
doesn't
no.
move around with the agility anymore. But it's a Santo film from 1984, and that was probably his pre-last film that he did before his final bout and his death in '85.
Oh,
The only other two I'd throw in is Santo and Blue Demon against the Monsters, which is
Yes.
Oh
pretty
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
I wrote about that for Bill Zane, Driving Asylum, and then I really like Macabre Legends of the Colony too, which is another Mummies Guadalajara movie too.
Yes, that's Mil Máscaras. Yes, that's
Yeah.
another good one. Lorena Velasquez is not. She's a beauty. I love her. I love her in all
Yeah.
the movies that she did. I think that the secret of El Santo, she was one of the few women I could say that actually knows his identity. He revealed himself to her on the set of Santo versus the Zombies, because that was the first film that was in. Lorena Velasquez was intrigued and wanted to see his face. He said, "Look, I'm in with you in this film. You're going to be you're the lead, but I'm your lead female role. But I need to see. I want to see what you look like." And he revealed to her one time. So in that film, he did reveal. And if you read the story out of Somos Revista, they talk about how he revealed himself a couple of times to certain people. He actually did take his mask off. But then again, at the end, he showed us to his fans. He just took it off a little bit. But Lorena Velasquez didn't know his secret.
And that was implied in some of the films that I've seen where, like, the girl he was with knew what he looked like, but they would never tell us, the audience.
Right, right.
But one of the first ones I watched of the Santo films, and I'm pretty sure I started watching those because of the B Movie Cast, because I heard you guys talk about one or two of those films. And it was Santo and Blue Demon in Atlantis, I think.
Yeah.
Was the first one I saw. That was enjoyable. Then, like Sam mentioned, versus the Monsters. I love that one. And one I saw recently was it was Santo and Blue Demon versus like Frankenstein. Oh, it was Dracula and the Wolfman.
Yes.
Good one.
Yes.
That was so much fun. My grandson even enjoyed it, and he was just like sitting there enthralled through the movie. You know.
Not to mention Santo versus the Nazis. He did a movie. There's a movie that involves spies and Nazi, collaborators, and it has the whole thing with the swastika and everything, and they're all from the Third Reich, and Santo's in it. He's versus the Nazis. So he's been to Atlantis with Blue Demon. He fights Nazis. What else can the famous, legendary Santo, El Mascarado de Plata, cannot do?
Right, and that's the thing I've been trying to explain to people that outside of the show that didn't know is that, these guys like Santo, they wear the masks all the time, yet they fight crime, they solve crimes, they fight the mafia, they fight aliens, they fight Nazis, everything. The kitchen sink is just thrown in, and these movies are. Bill, I just wanted to kind of grab you at the end here because I know you and I kind of walking into this, we were both like, well, we don't know a whole heck of a lot about Mexican horror movies, but I don't know, have you done any research? Do you happen to have a favorite one that you've seen so far that you might like? Could be a luchador film, could be a straight up Mexican horror movie.
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of faves. Most of them have already been talked about, though, so I don't have much to add to this after what's already been said.
Well, go ahead. And tell
But
us what
Tintorera is a favorite of mine. I go for the more sleazy movies in general, and the whole later part of the Cardona's output is where I tend to gravitate. I love Tintorera. Hugo Stiglitz is in it, of course. Andres Garcia and Susan George. They are three people who end up vacationing together at the same resort where a tiger shark is attacking people and killing them. And half the movie, well, I would say maybe even a third of the movie is about the shark. The other 2/3 of the movie is about their menage a trois that they form. And they're sort of like, they've got this, thruple thing going only for their vacation. So I really love that one because it's way out of left field. And also I'm already mentioned Night of the Bloody Apes is a fave. Cyclone, we talked about that one. that's just a brutal film.
Isn't it?
It's got sort of a nasty edge to it that the American disaster films didn't quite get. Some of the American ones got nasty too, but the Mexican one really went for it, like the one that Cardona's made. And I respect that because they made it a very it wasn't an adventure, it was an ordeal that
Right.
these people were going through. It wasn't like Airport 77, like where and Christopher Lee and everybody's there. This was like, he did try and make it like that because, like we mentioned, Lionel Stander is in it and a bunch of other recognizable faces. But it's just so brutal and nihilistic, and I go for that one.
Yeah, I have to say I was surprised. I mean, I love a good disaster movie anyways, and that just like you said, it just took a disaster movie and then went up the notch a bit.
Yeah,
Okay, we're gonna go there. All right, cool.
we're going to get into cannibalism and all sorts of things like dogs being killed.
Oh my god.
Um, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah, yeah,
Hey
yeah.
Roger, I just want to make a quick mention real quick that you mentioned that Bill was talking about Cardona. Cardona has an amazing legacy. He's been around for every bit of 50 years plus in film and in production and everything, directing.
Yeah.
But going back to the Enmascarado de Plata from 1953, okay, that is Rene Cardona is actually in the film. The senior Cardona, Rene, and his son, Rene Cardona Jr., is also in the film. His name is Pecas, and he's like the sidekick of a medical asesino, the medical assassin. So throughout the entire film, the series, it's like Batman and Robin. So you got a medical asesino and Pecas, which is the sidekick, where he actually takes him to the laboratory and he tells him, here's his watch. He gives him a watch that he can signal a medical asesino anytime he's in danger. So that's Rene Cardona Jr., the son of Rene Cardona. They're both in the film. Mind you, Jr. went on to do many, many things later on. He even went into horror. He did a movie in 65, I think it was. It was called Spiritism, Espiritismo.
Mhm.
That was Rene Cardona Jr. in that film. So, I mean, it's amazing how you get the family involved, the legacy of these families carry on from, father, son, and so forth. And they continue to make great horror films throughout,
Many people might not realize that how high profile one of Rene Cardona's films was in the United States, and that was Survive
Oh, yes.
from
Yes.
1976. It
Mhm.
was originally released in 75 in Mexico, I believe, and it was the American producer Alan Carr was on vacation in Mexico, and outside of his hotel room, he saw people lined up around the block to go see this movie that was at the theater, and it was Survive. But it's a movie about the notorious plane crash in the Andes, where
Mhm.
the survivors resorted to cannibalism.
Yes.
That really was not the focus of Rene Cardona's film, but Alan Carr made it the focus of Rene Cardona's film. He purchased it, the rights to it, and Paramount, I'm pretty sure it was Paramount, he sold it to them. And he was the producer of Grease and numerous other hits in the
Mhm.
70s. This was right before Grease. Grease was already in the works when this happened. And or maybe it was United Artists. I'm not really sure. I should have thought of that before I opened my mouth. But the point is that he polished this movie. He gave it sort of like an American sheen to it. They put some filters over the lens for a couple scenes, and or over the transfer for a couple of scenes, and then they had a whole new soundtrack that they did, and they released it in the United States as Survive, and it became a big hit because the ad campaign was all about the cannibalism. So it was sort of like a joint exploitation effort from Mexico and the United States, and it played everywhere. It was a big deal.
Oh yeah, I agree with you totally, Bill. I mean, it's an awesome film. I mean, just the fact alone that the film was based on an actual true facts. It was a true
Mhm.
story. That this really the soccer team that was trapped. This really happened. And,
Yeah.
it's amazing how they, the title says it all. What do you do to survive? Yeah, that's it. You go to the ultimate level, and that's what you got to do to survive, to stay alive. So it is a great film, documentary film, biography per se of, of what happened on that tragic day, back in '79. But I tell you what, I wish, they released it on DVD, I believe, but, it's kind of like hard to come by. I'd like to see a nice Blu-ray print of that. I really would.
Yeah, I think it's something that's sort of in legal limbo at the time or right
Mhm.
now, or maybe people think that there wouldn't be much of an audience for
Right,
it today.
But Vinegar Syndrome did the Cardona box set in December, so and it says volume 1, so perhaps there'll be a volume 2. That would be awesome.
But can they get a hold of the American version? Like, it would be nice to have
Yeah.
both versions of the film on one disc
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. I
or
have
two
to tell
discs.
you guys too. There was one point where I got an invite from the North Pole to go to a party, and I thought about it after a while, and I figured, well, maybe attending the Donner Party is probably not a good idea.
Yeah. Don't fall for that.
No.
They're into some weird stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, I'm honored. Juan, I am so honored that you're here.
Thank
saying
you.
this thing. It's been amazing. Bill, if you want to give everyone your where we can contact you, because we already know about Sam and Juan, and all the stuff will be in the show notes as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, Sam and I have a weekly webcast together. It's called the Drive-In Asylum Double Feature. It's on Saturday nights, and you can pick up the live stream on the Groovy Doom Facebook page or YouTube channel. It usually starts at 8 p.m. unless I have to work, and then we just do a one movie at 11 p.m. But for the rest of the summer, we're going to be able to do double features beginning at 8 p.m. on Saturday nights. I also publish a fanzine called Drive-In Asylum. You can check that out at on Etsy. Just search Drive-In Asylum on Etsy, and the shop will come up. The name of the shop is Groovy Doom. We're just about to release a new issue. It's our 6th special, and it's all about movies from 1981.
Awesome. And as I said, we've already got Bill and I'm sorry, Sam and Juan's contact info. Now we have Bill's. I'm going to put that all in the show notes. I can be found at havenpodcasts.com, as well as my shows, Then Is Now Podcast and The East Meets the West, in which we discuss spaghetti westerns and Shaw Brothers films. Those are on all the podcasts.
Ooh, Shaw Brothers. No, don't get into that.
Oh, Juan, we got to get you on that show. It's
oh
amazing.
my God! Don't get me into Shaw Brothers, because now we're on a whole trend that I love. I mean, that's another one that, besides Mexican horror, Shaw Brothers, forget it. But anyway,
right. I'm going to talk to you tomorrow. We're going to book you on this show for next week.
Listen, real quick, I just want to make a quick final note here. We're having our 500th podcast.
Yes.
It's episode 500 of the B Movie Cast is going to take place on July 17th, I believe, next week. And it's going to be the 500th episode, and the episode is A Clockwork Orange.
Nice.
So we'd like to invite all of you to tune in. If you're not that day to the B Movie Cast, you can go on to the actual website of the B Movie Cast at bmoviecast.com. Or if you have a podcast, you can go onto the podcast and pull up B Movie Cast, and you can see all our episodes there. And we'll be tuning in for episode 500 on the 17th of July, which is going to be the Clockwork Orange. I'm really looking forward to that episode.
Well, I have to say, I'm surprised you didn't do Xanadu for the 500th.
Well, no, because I think they did it. I don't know if they did it prior to that, or they were going to do another Olivia Newton-John film called Tomorrow, which is actually a movie about an alien invasion with Olivia Newton-John in it. I don't know if you know that one, Tomorrow.
Two O's, yeah.
Yeah, that one. But I mean, Xanadu's been kicked around, and I mean, just Mary's hesitating. I don't know why, but Mary, we got to do Xanadu. But anyway, yes, probably right after the 500th episode, we might get around to that.
Awesome. We'll definitely check that out. And
good.
Excuse me, I just want to say, for my contact info, more recently, folks, you could find me on a website called thelist.com. I just started working there. In fact, we're recording this on what, July 10th? On July 18th, I'm going to be working full time for Static Media, writing soap opera news for thelist.com. And I'm not joking. This is my legit job. I write soap opera news. I've already got 5 articles posted.
Awesome. Awesome.
It's a dream job. I get out of my crappy day job. I'm so happy. So I'll be starting with them. So follow me there at thelist.com. I'll post the link on the website as well. And I'm just wanting to say thank you for joining us today. Once again, thank you, Sam and Juan, for being here. Obviously, Bill, I love having you here all the time. And I'm going to replay the Santo video, the spoof video that we did, as well as then run the end credits. So if you guys want to just mute everything and hang around, we can talk for a couple minutes at the end of the show, all right?
Okay.
All right.
All right, so hold on. I'm going to, of course, it takes me a little bit now. I got to do this.
It's too late. We left already.
Oh, no. Hold on, I just got, share the screen. There we go. And advanced video. No. Hold on, I'm just going to share this. All right, there we go. Hello, I am Santo, the world's greatest wrestler. Regor has invited me here to present to you one of the greatest wrestling challenges of my life. In this, I am pitted against my friend and sometimes adversary, Blue Demon. This is one of my greatest matches of all time. So get ready to enjoy Santo being victorious.
And so begins one of the most anticipated matches, Santo versus Blue Demon. Many fans in the crowd believe that Santo could lose this match. The invincible Santo will be put to the test. Santo is a really strong wrestler, a great ruler with an incredible physique, weighing more than 220 pounds, but who still flies through the air thanks to the skills of Blue Demon. Blue Demon's been waiting for this chance to fight Santo. He not only wants to defeat him, he wants to rip his mask to pieces. Look at those ruler moves. He doesn't care about anything as long as he defeats Santo. Look at Blue Demon. He's been training for days and weeks for this great challenge. And now he uses a dangerous Boston Crab. Oh, Santo is able to break the move by using all the strength of his legs. As always, Santo and Blue Demon bring a lot of attractive ladies to the arena. The crowd screams for their idol, Santo! Santo! He's trapped in an arm lock. Now gets a hard blow to the ribs. Santo seems to be out of energy. Sometimes Santo lacks the weight, but he makes up for that with skill. Santo was pinned to the mat but knew how to avoid the count. Santo looks like he never tires. Oh, but takes a heavy punch to the face. The stakes are high now. Blue Demon is now receiving the heavy blows from this monster who weighs over 220 pounds. However, Blue Demon is now quick on his feet. The match has barely started, but everyone has showed us great moves and courage. Blue Demon gets sick of it. Flying scissors! Great move by Blue Demon! Whoa, it's amazing! The crowd wants to see a legal win, and Blue Demon gives it. Victory for Blue Demon. Just listen to that sold-out crowd ovation.